We are ready to get our board meeting started. Kathy, please let the record show that all school board members are in attendance. Stephen, welcome, and you are ready to help us lead us in the pledge.
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we'll be joined by our newly named Missouri Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year from Parkview High School, Juliet White. Juliet, would you come forward? And we'll save her formal introduction for immediately after the pledge as we begin honoring excellence. But Juliet, whenever you're ready, if you would lead us in the pledge, that would be great. For those who are able, feel free to stand and join in.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we are so honored to have Juliet with us and to brag about her many accomplishments. Juliet was considered for the state recognition after being named the Springfield Youth of the Year by the Boys and Girls Club earlier this spring. It is the second year in a row that a Parkview student has been named Springfield Youth of the Year. As a student at Parkview High School's Leadership School, Juliet demonstrates the traits of a student leader. One of her teachers, Carrie Nichols, said this about her: "Others want to follow Juliet because of her work ethic and her personality. She has taken the opportunities that the Parkview Leadership School provides to grow as a leader. She has done true self-reflection and knows what areas she wants to strengthen. She has a real growth mindset in every aspect of her life." As Missouri Youth of the Year, Juliet will receive a $4,000 scholarship and the opportunity to be considered for the Midwest Regional Youth of the Year. With her Springfield Youth of the Year title, Juliet earned a $16,000 college scholarship with the potential for various college matches. Woo-hoo! Congratulations to Juliet. We wish you the best of luck as you advance in the competition, and we know you'll continue to make Springfield proud. Congratulations. We'll now continue with our Honoring Excellence, and we are pleased to have another statewide award winner in this room. We're also joined by the Missouri Middle School Athletic Director of the Year. Mr. Marty Marsh, would you please come forward? Yay. Earlier this month, Marty Marsh was named the Missouri Middle School Athletic Director of the Year by the Missouri Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. During his tenure as Assistant Athletic Director for SPS, Marty has helped guide the expansion of middle school athletics and activities for SPS students. His efforts to successfully implement this initiative are among the reasons cited for receiving this honor. Leading up to this award, he was also named the Middle School Athletic Director of the Year for the Southwest District of Missouri. Among his many other duties, Marty serves as event coordinator for the Bass Pro Tournament of Champions and the Pink and White Lady Classic basketball tournaments. He's been a driving force behind the excellence of the SPS athletics program during his 26 years with the district. Fortunately, this may be one of the last opportunities we have to honor Marty in his current role. Beginning July 1st, he will join the staff of the Missouri State High School Activities Association in Columbia as an Assistant Executive Director. Marty, we congratulate you on the recent honors and we wish you well as you begin a new chapter and a new adventure and continuing to make an impact on the lives of Missouri students. Thank you so much.
That's right.
Well, thank you. It's certainly been an honor to serve the students of Springfield Public Schools for 26 years. It's truly a highlight of my life.
Yeah.
As I've said many a times, I leave this job with mixed emotions. I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about going and working, serving students in athletics and activities at the state level. But also at the same time, I'm leaving something that's been a lot. So thank you for your support.
Stephen, we have have a couple board comments that would like to be made.
Hang on, don't go yet.
Yeah, don't go anywhere. Come here. First of all, Marty is a legend in our community and within our schools. And so we thank you for your dedicated service and caring about our students and expanding those opportunities for our students. And so much so, Marty, that Bruce Renner made his way back tonight in the audience to be here to cheer you on, because he's been with you throughout that entire journey, and we acknowledge that tonight. I know Denise may have a couple comments, as well as maybe some other board members, but I would also say that congratulations on your award. And I know for sure that not only is your family, but your dad would be very proud of you.
So, Marty and I go back a few years, and it's been such a pleasure and a joy to see you continue to move into positions where you could be an influence of more students in Springfield Public Schools. Each move, you have had a greater influence on students, and I know several years ago we were talking about improving the opportunities for students at the middle school level, and what an amazing success that has been, especially with our archery activities and the number, and I've had a chance to attend some of those, and the numbers of students that have had an opportunity to get engaged and to be a part of that. Marty, it's just been amazing. And anyone that attends the Tournament of Champions and has a chance to see you in action, running up and down the stairs and back and forth, and that's how hard you work on that. And so recently there have been several occasions I've said, okay, so when are we going to honor Marty? And the answer has been, well, hold on, because it seems like then there's another award or recognition that you're receiving. And then the most recent one, where you're moving on to an amazing job in which you're going to be able to be an influence on students statewide, was one that I was very excited, but it's a little heartbreaking. So I know what you're thinking and how you feel, but we certainly have been very fortunate to have you in Springfield for the many years and everything that you've done. So you'll do great things, and the state's so lucky to have you, but we certainly will miss you.
You're here.
Thank you.
We'll now continue our Honoring Excellence with recognition of our newly named Teacher of the Year, as well as other Teacher of the Year finalists. We'd now like to present to you those individuals. We ask you to please come forward as we call your name. Amanda Adams, Melanie Donnell, Bob Lynch, Terry Schafitzel, and Carrie Sykes. And I believe Mr. Sykes is unable to be with us this evening. He had a prior commitment with a student at one of their events. So we're so glad that you all are here. Last week, the Foundation for Springfield Public Schools hosted the annual Celebrate SPS event. This is always a wonderful event, and we appreciate the efforts of Natalie Murdoch, Tina Pham, and the Foundation staff to honor our SPS employee team, especially given the complications presented by the pandemic over this past year. At the event, Dr. Amanda Adams was named the 2021-2022 Teacher of the Year. Amanda is the lead teacher of the Health Sciences Academy at Mercy. She has served in public education for the last 14 years with a student-centered approach and a personal love of learning. Amanda began her career with SPS at Pershing Middle School in 2008, where she taught 8th grade science, coached cheerleading, sponsored pep club, and coached the Science Olympiad. In 2013, Amanda left Pershing to be a lead teacher at the Health Sciences Academy. As the lead teacher, she has been involved in curriculum development, data analysis, professional learning, student discipline, parent communication, and partner outreach. Amanda and the 4 finalists were selected from more than 400 nominations as outstanding examples of the teachers we have at SPS. As I mentioned, the finalists are Melanie Donnell, who is a kindergarten teacher at York Elementary School. I believe Melanie is unable to be with us. Mr. Bob Lynch, who is the communication arts teacher at Glendale High School. Terry Schafitzel, who is a 2nd grade teacher at Pleasant View Elementary School. And Carrie Sykes, who is a 4th grade teacher at Gray Elementary School. Congratulations to each of you. We thank you for coming tonight. And Dr. Adams, if you would like to speak or share anything, we would certainly welcome you.
I appreciate you guys inviting us. So I do want to say something about Dr. Bob. When I saw that he was a finalist too, I was like, oh no. But because I've actually learned things from him at SPS when we've gone to learn from our fellow teachers, and there's things that I've got from him that I use in my class. But I just want to thank you guys and the foundation for taking time to think about teachers and highlighting us, and I'm excited to serve as next year's Teacher of the Year, and I look forward to getting to know you more.
Yes. Congratulations.
For this month's Building Up recognition, we have a special treat for you. It's a little different than usual. We've chosen a group of SPS employees to highlight rather than just one individual. We have 10 high school nurses who not only meet the increased demands created by COVID-19 this year, but they seamlessly fulfilled their job duties of supporting students and staff at all 5 of our very large high school complexes. We'll let them come in. We all know that school nurses have gone above and beyond, as everyone has with the pandemic response, but as extra challenges have been presented to them, they have faced and conquered those challenges in addition to serving the large populations at each of our high schools every day. They truly have risen to the occasion, and it is our honor to share their story.
When we started with this pandemic, our school nurses just jumped right on from pre-K through 12, just jumped right in.
We of course still deal with any issues that we normally do. We give medication every day, we deal with diabetics every day, we have emergencies.
We were able to be trained by the Springfield Greene County Health Department, and we also took some training with Johns Hopkins University on contact tracing.
When we have a positive, we go to the classroom and we ask to see seating charts, and we have to look at the physical surroundings and determine if they were masked, are they more than 6 feet away. Each quarter we have filled a 3-inch 3-ring binder with those sheets, keeping track of things.
We were able to refer our students and our staff for COVID testing, and the district now has free COVID testing for students and staff who are symptomatic, and that has been an incredible help.
We were very fortunate to even partner with the Center for Disease Control and Prevention this year, and they did research, and our mitigation strategies were very highly effective because we had that school health professional that's right there that immediately starts doing contact tracing for the classrooms.
The students have been amazing at wearing their masks. They want to be here, they want to be involved, they want to see their friends, to be able to return to 5 days a week schooling.
It's been extremely difficult for them not to be at school, not to have that social contact with their friends. The majority of the kids were really excited when they came back.
We've been leaders nationally in our responses, because just think about how many school districts across the nation haven't had seated classes, and we have. And we've been able to do that because we've implemented these strategies, socially distancing and making sure that we're still using good hand washing practices, and that takes a team effort. So that takes everybody at the school side, including all of the staff. So I'm very, very honored and proud of what we have done in Springfield Public Schools, and that really has proven positively that those strategies work.
Joined tonight by several of our nursing representatives, and please just raise your hand as I call your name. From Central High School, we have Laura Smith and Susan Grin. From Glendale High School, Lori Harmon and Jennifer Smith. From Hillcrest High School, Mandy Prosser and Julie Creed. From Kickapoo High School, Tammy Hawley and Angie Owings. And from Parkview High School, Amy Howell and Julie Lang. Thank you all again. concludes Honoring Excellence for the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Our next agenda item is the approval of the agenda. The recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented. Do I have someone willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Charles with the first. Is there a second?
Second.
Denise with the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote. Kathy, hers didn't pop up.
Oh, there it is. A little slow.
Sometimes it takes just a little bit.
Took a minute.
Motion passes. Our next agenda item is public comments to address agenda items, for which our board secretary has given me those people who are requesting to speak. I will read our directive. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the audience about issues being discussed. It is recommended that requests to speak be submitted prior to the beginning of the meeting. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes for each speaker and will be timed by the board secretary. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members in name and open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the school or in the district office. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to comments and/or concerns from the public, but will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. If you have materials that you would want to share, please provide them to the board secretary prior to speaking, and she will distribute them to board members. Our first public speaker tonight is Roy Holland. Okay, we'll move on and we'll bring, okay. Good evening, Roy. That's right. Good evening.
Thank you, President Leonard and board members. Good evening. My name is Roy Holland, and I'm here to briefly update the legislative report. 2 weeks ago, there was 2 items of interest to Springfield in the state legislature that related to the election process of board members. Those have been combined in the House, and the bill was passed on Thursday to approve the authority for local school districts to have a choice of being an at-large district, or they could vote and go ahead and do their own sub-districts in the way and the time that they choose. So the vote on that was 155-0. So for some decades now, our board meetings have begun with our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. That's the traditional, and it ends with liberty and justice for all. Those are important words. But for the same years, we have continued our same process with the at-large board members election pattern, and this, I believe, violates the federal standards for democracy and for justice. But now we have all our state representatives just from Springfield and across Missouri giving us a new standard and a new opportunity. So I would challenge this board to say that it's time that you should look at doing this. You have a position in opposition to this bill, and there's an opportunity to change that position if you so choose. Tonight represents 2 weeks of duty for our 3 new board members, and the question here is, when will they be recognized as the most recent will of the people? Should be as we go forward. Must they be politically corrected first, or can they go ahead and speak, and do they need correction on how to vote? Certainly they can start out with what they've heard through the campaigns, and there's been quite a long campaign.
listening to teachers and parents. One thing that keeps coming up is the no response policy to public comments at board meetings, and that's still a surprise for many local citizens. It suppresses dialogue, it promotes misunderstanding, I believe, and the new members, I think, should be entitled to vote on a prompt vote for its discontinuation. While our city and Greene County have open public vetting processes for selection of new administrative leaders, this board seems to have avoided such a process for recent choices of superintendent and principal at Central. They were not only covert but also hastily chosen just a few weeks before the board election. This suggests possible distrust of the new members in their conformity, or confirms the attitudes of existing members when voting unanimously for selections who had obvious deficiencies. So finally, the future of this system depends on this board recognizing the closed processes and the absence of discussion, as was noted by member Bruce Renner. Major changes needed. Let's all wake up before we are completely inundated by the competition of adjacent school districts. Is this the legacy we seek? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy. Our next public speaker is Mary Byrne. Good evening, Mary.
Good evening. I'd like to address the Focus Area 3, Goal 1 of the 2019-2020 Strategic Plan mid-year report that'll be presented tonight, specifically with regard to the following language. Through the implementation of the 2020-21 budget, an additional investment occurred to support Focus Area 5 of the District Strategic Plan for Equity and Diversity. This addition provides for the design and development of a Grow Your Own program to support qualified individuals seeking educator credentials and employment in Springfield Public Schools. First, please be advised, that diversity training was introduced into human resource programs by an Iowa elementary teacher named Jane Elliott in the 1960s. At 86, Elliott is still selling her blue eyes and brown eyes experiment that she imposed on her third grade students. A comment describes her methods on her website, saying it won't help much to be prepared to face Jane Elliott. This elderly woman will tear down any shield. Even we, the spectators and blue-eyed, can't get rid of this feeling of uneasiness, embarrassment, anxiety, and utterly helpless hatred when she starts keeping people down, humiliating them, deriding them, incapacitating them. No doubt about this, for 3/4 of the time in this documentation, Jane Elliott is the meanest, the lowest, the most detestable, the most hypocritical human being hell ever spit back on earth, but she should be an example for us all. I disagree. National news stories featured in the Gateway Pundit, the Daily Caller, the Fox News reported SPS teachers experiencing the same feelings of uneasiness, embarrassment, anxiety, and utterly helpless hatred when they were forced to participate in diversity training that included components of critical race theory, as described in the December 8th, 2020 PowerPoint presented to this board. Second, be advised that in 2007, special report of the National Legal and Policy Center entitled The Authoritarian Roots of Corporate Diversity Training described techniques similar to Elliott's, describing them as training exercise that involves psychological warfare against employees, or specifically white employees, to cure them of racist beliefs. Third, a March 12 Harvard Business Review article entitled Diversity Training Doesn't Work reported the same results of a study conducted by researchers at Harvard, Berkeley, and the University of Minnesota. After studying 829 companies over 31 years, the researchers concluded diversity training has no positive effects in the average workplace. Millions of dollars a year were spent on training, resulting in, well, nothing. Attitudes and the diversity of the organization remain the same. In firms where training is mandatory or emphasizes the threat of lawsuits, training actually has negative effects on management. But it's deeper than that. When people divide into categories to illustrate the idea of diversity, it reinforces the idea of categories. Categories are dehumanizing. They simplify the complexity of a human being, so focusing on people on the categories increases their prejudice. The solution, instead of seeing people as categories, we need to see people as people. Stop training people to be more accepting of diversity. It's too conceptual and it doesn't work. The equity and diversity training that is rooted in Jane Elliott's methods of psychological and emotional abuse and derived from components of critical race theory as described in the December 8, 2020 report is not worthy of additional investment of our tax dollars. In fact, additional investment in such training could be considered malfeasance. A constructive alternative to this idea of grow your own diversity training is offered by Carol Swain's Unity Training Solutions. Her company's mission is to provide viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories that divide American and disrupt institutions. Clearly, after yesterday's report in the News Leader that our ACTs are the lowest they've been in 10 years, part of the responsibility lies in the lack of appropriate teacher professional development that would be preparing teachers for appropriate instruction in our classrooms. I thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Our next speaker is David Noakes. Did I say that correctly? Okay. Welcome, David.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. Before that happens, some good news and some bad news. Bad news is the city of Springfield is having difficulty finding people that want a career of policing. Springfield Police Department has 39 police officer vacancies. The city has only been able to place 9 people in this year's academy that was scheduled for at least 20 recruit officers. By December this year, there will be at least another 10 officers leave the department. The good news is, I have some evidence why this is happening. We can help the city thrive in police recruiting. There's an organization in this community that providing training to teachers, staff, and students that vilifies our police and teaches hate. This organization is the Springfield Public School System. Through a partnership with the AB Global Incorporated, research was received on innovative solutions to strategic and management issues. The project's webinars thus far include online training titled Elementary Social Emotional Learning as it relates to racial injustice, training resources which are anti-police from EAB Global are implanted directly into classrooms and curriculums. Training resources include drop-down menus on these couple topics. Book list, Something Happened in Our Town, it's the book I have with me tonight, Teaching Racism in the Classroom. Under Teaching Tolerance resources, we're following articles. The Revolution will be tweeted. It's about a middle school teacher empowering his students to lift their voices in discussion about Ferguson by assigning them to tweet. Bringing Black Lives Matter, Inc. into the classroom, an educator introduces ways to discuss BLM across all grade levels. Another article, a district profile, Black Lives Matter at school. Meet a school district that brought BLM in the classroom and learn how you can do it too. Another article, what is white privilege, really? The article. Another article, what school police funding would be better spent elsewhere? That officer might want to know about that. Regarding the book I brought tonight, it's available at the following elementary schools: Bingham, Bowerman, Field, Pershing, and Roundtree. I will now read from the book. After school, Emma asked her mother, "Why did the police shoot that man?" "It was a mistake," said her mother. "I feel sad for this man and his family." "Yes, the police thought he had a gun," said the father. "It wasn't a mistake," said the sister Liz. "The cop shot him because he was black." You can tell I'm getting a little irritated as I read. Was the man shot dangerous?" asked Emma. "No," mother said. "Shooting him was a mistake. It was a mistake as part of the pattern." "Like the pattern on my blanket?" Emma asked. "Yes, but this pattern is being nice to white people and mean to black people." In another house, Josh asked his mother, "Can police go to jail?" "Yes," said the mother. "Why do you ask?" "The white policeman who shot the black man," said Josh. "Will he go to jail?" "What he did was wrong," said the mother, "but he won't go to jail." "Why not?" asked Josh. "Cops stick up for each other," said Brother Malcolm, "and they don't like black men." Guys, I'm a retired major of the Springfield Police Department. That really just makes me mad. I'll try to keep it together. Does what I read from the book reflect what SPS administrators and the board think of our community, police officers and deputies? Do the training resource documents that we talk about reflect the opinion and vision of the Springfield Public School System? In an article in the newsletter that we talked about, dated this year, April 26, Springfield's average ACT score is lowest in 10 years. I would suggest that you spent less time teaching about racism in their 3 R's, and trashing the police and stuff like that. Scores might come up, and start teaching 3 R's of reading, arithmetic, writing. I don't represent the Springfield Police Department tonight, but I do represent numerous officers. There's 360-some authorized strength at Springfield, Greene County Sheriff's Department, Springfield Branson Airport. This officer sitting right here, I'm not speaking for him, but you guys have your own police department. Well, I give attendees tonight a chance to show their support for police officers, which includes the officer here tonight protecting us. With our applause, we can say we do not believe our community police departments and sheriff's department are systemically racist. I wish all the board members would have clapped, but obviously, thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next public speaker is Nelson Knapp.
Hi, my name is Nelson Knapp, and
Welcome, Nelson.
We lived in Springfield for about 27 years. We have 2 daughters, both of which did very well, going through Cherokee and Kickapoo. Sorry, Glendale folks. And they were well prepared to go to college. And my concern is that I want to address some disturbing trends in our school system, because I'm afraid that the kids coming through school right now are not going to be similarly prepared. Last year I attended a board meeting where a report was presented detailing how well our schools were measured up against state averages. Sadly, in most of the categories, SPS ranked below the state averages. Math percentages by grade were particularly indicative. The best we did was in 5th grade, we were minus 3.6% versus the state average. 8th grade dropped to 12.6% below the state average. Regarding dropout rates, SPS led the state with an average of 4.1 versus 1.9 as a state average. So students here were dropping out at a rate twice what we saw the state average. Our 4-year graduation rate at that time was 85.7, well below the 89.2 of the state. In DESE's 2018 APR summary of districts, we ranked 511th out of 557 school districts. 92% were doing better. Surprisingly, these results were deemed sufficient to award a contract extension, which to me begs the question, since when is below average acceptable? Hopefully not going forward. But the beat goes on. Several people have talked about the news leader front page article that talked about Springfield's ACT scores. They were the lowest in 10 years, falling below the state and national benchmarks. Our students' scores dropped in English, math, and science. Pretty significant categories, in my opinion. Our composite score fell to 20.0 from 20.4. The national and state averages were 20.6 and 20.7, respectively. The article stated that Springfield's ACT score stayed the same or dropped each year since 2015. For that year and for 2012, the district posted an average score of 22.6. Our competitive set surrounding districts scored much better. Logan, Rogersville, and Nixa, for instance, were 17% higher than our ACT scores. In March of this year, a news leader article also talked about the drop of enrollment, about 1,500 people, our students in SPS. Makes one wonder why. COVID is one obvious reason, but perhaps there are other issues that come into play, such as decreased teacher-student interactions, as kids are now bury their faces in Chromebook computers because textbooks have been eliminated. Mandatory critical race theory indoctrination, which, as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has said, teaches students to hate their country and hate each other. Critical race theory is not, as the news leader is fond of saying, quote, an academic movement from civil rights scholars to examine the role of race plays in the law and the way institutions operate. It is, in fact, based on Marxism, which teaches to bifurcate the population into subgroups and pit them against one another. Sound familiar? Another reason may be reading books which contain pornographic material. I think you were all treated to an oral reading of The Perks of Being a Wallflower a couple of weeks ago, in which kids are taught how to administer a Lewinsky to a non-consenting individual. What does that scenario teach our boys what girls mean when they say no when they grow up? Or maybe being a poor custodian of taxpayer funds, for instance, paying 2 full-time superintendents for 2 months at an additional cost of $50,000. Why do we need a new one and a retiring one to overlap for 2 months? I don't know. Finally, being an unresponsive school board to the concerns of parents. One can only hope the new superintendent and reconfigured school board can turn this around. I'm an old marketing guy, so I would suggest that maybe a good place to look would be contacting some of the 1,500 people that have left the school system and find out why. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Norman Ely.
Before we start, I want to clarify it's a doctor, just because when I talk, it may make a little more sense. So it's Dr. Ely. The following quote is from diversity training put forth by SPS. Because the differences in COVID-19 cases and mortality cannot be explained by poverty alone, our findings give credence to our hypothesis that structural racism underlies the disproportionately higher rates of COVID-19 infections and alarmingly high rates of deaths in predominantly black communities. That's from NYU Langone Medical Center. Is there a disproportionate distribution of health care in the U.S.? Yes, but it is not due to structural racism in health care. It's a multifactorial problem that has been looked at for decades. It affects many communities, particularly small rural communities and inner cities, regardless of color, ethnicity, etc. This is a complex topic that can't be covered in detail tonight. One conclusion that was conveniently omitted from the COVID statement was also from New York University Langone Health System that states, the study found that key in explaining the disparities of overall disproportionate infection and death rates are rates of exposure. People of color are more likely to be exposed to the virus compared to white patients. Combined with higher rates of underlying conditions and poor access to health care, these communities are therefore infected at a higher rate, not systemic racism. You have chosen to promote a political viewpoint by choosing a selective statement that disparages a large group of people who have dedicated their lives and their careers to help all people. I work with dedicated doctors, nurses, and numerous other staff that are necessary to provide quality patient care. They come in all colors, backgrounds, ethnicity, etc. I am privileged and honored to watch these dedicated people deliver health care without concern for one's race, country of origin, or any other criterion you can name. I myself am at age risk for getting COVID, work full-time without regard for a person's skin color or anything else. To state that there is systemic racism in healthcare is not based on fact and is insulting. If you can prove that systemic racism exists in healthcare and it's not just a hypothesis, please show me the in-depth studies to prove this. If your goal is to divide along racial or other lines and to turn some group against others, mission accomplished. Maybe this can be a reason for one of your things to celebrate. The message you are sending to our community is that doctors and other healthcare providers are racist and treat people differently based on their skin color or other factors. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm not only insulted, but extremely angry that this information is being put out to our students and teachers. One local healthcare provider was called racist by an SPS employee because he or she had the audacity to make the statement that he or she treats all patients the same. I can only assume you are purposely trying to create mistrust and division in this community. SPS's role is to give all students a great education, which you are clearly failing to do. Before patting yourselves on the back for a great job, look at the statistics of achievement. SPS, the largest district in the state, ranks at the bottom. 25 schools rank below 500 throughout the state. The board and administration should be appalled and embarrassed by what you have allowed to do in this school district. Stop the indoctrination campaign. Stop telling students and teachers what to think, but start providing actual education and teach students how to think. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Marlon Graves. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. To correct that, it's Marlon Rashawn Graves. My voice is probably going out, but I'm going to speak to people the best way I can. Thank you, first of all, for having me here. Okay, can you guys hear me? First of all, I had a plan on what I was going to talk about, but listening to what I've already listened to changed. First of all, I'm a product of Springfield, Missouri. Born here, raised here, proud of being from here. Went to Weller Elementary. Was proud of going to Weller Elementary. Went on to Pipkin Middle School. Proud of going to Springfield Middle School. Graduate of Central High School. Proud of Central High School. I went on and went to college. Baker University. Actually, Kemper Military first. Then graduated. I went on to Baker University. Graduated. I did a lot of good things. I did a lot of good things because of what the school system was teaching. Number one, at that time. See, at that time, it was about people who love people. It was about people who love people. Now, I'm glad you clapped it, because what I'm about to say, I hope you clap after that as well. It's sad that I left here. I spent 21 years in Florida, teaching in Miami Central High School. At the time, was 4,000 students that I walked in that school. My job was to teach the Florida Comprehension Achievement Test, or should I say, bring those students from an F grade to an A grade with limited funds. You know who made the difference? People that look like you, people that look like you, people that look like me, things between black and white. It ain't about color, guys. It's not about color. No, I'm saying this. I want you to keep clapping. Because it's not about color. But what you're treating people right now, you're treating people wrong. You telling me that a black person cannot come into this school district and make a change? That's BS. You telling me that a Hispanic person that can't come into this school district and make a change? That's BS. See, the majority that's been here has been someone that looks like you. They look like you? I don't know. But I know this much. If you do not change this school system now, it will never be open to change. You see what's going on outside of here. I pray to God we don't have the killings that we have seen out here going on right now. I pray to God it doesn't happen here. I hope it doesn't happen here. I got 4 kids, 3 daughters, 23, graduate of Michigan State University, 18, getting ready to start college, Broward College in Fort Lauderdale, 15, getting ready to enter the Cambridge program, and graduating 2 years early, all because of diverse teachers and people who like to teach because of who they are, because of what they learn. But you got to stop shame here in Springfield, Missouri, because of your ignorance. I'm saying your ignorance. Racism stops when you decide that it stops. When you decide that fear is no longer going to lead you. Because fear has been leading this city for a long damn time. Now, I've been asking myself for 5 years since I've been back here, what am I going to do to make a difference? The only thing that I can do, put my foot in front of me, and I can act on it. Now, I'm part of a girls group, and I'm going to use this last minute to talk about this. You may have seen us in the news. It's called the Girl Like Me Network. Our girls come to us, and they talk about all the demons that you have put in their minds. Because they don't have no outlet to talk. They can't even go home and talk about it. But when they come to us, that's the president right there. Her name is Amby Lewis. She's a graduate of this city, Springfield, Glendale High School. If you knew her story, you would know why we need diversity in this school district right now. Now, we have about 35 girls in our program, and they trust us every week to help us in different ways what we would always put out there. I say we because a lot of us is part of it. Now, if you want to change, change. But don't sit up and keep talking about this racism issue. We're done with that. This lady that's coming here, Dr. Lathan, she knows about change. Give her a chance. Please, give her a chance.
Thank you.
Give everybody else a chance to try to do the same thing. This one.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Our next public speaker is Cheryl Clay. Good evening, Cheryl.
Good evening. It's been a minute.
Yes, it has.
I know y'all missed me. I'll see how much time I have left after I read my remarks, and then I'll move on from there. Good evening. I am here this evening, believe it or not, to express my support for the school board support for the Office of Equity and Diversity for the Springfield Public Schools School District. SPS has begun to demonstrate positive improvement on matters of diversity within our schools, recognizing that all students should have the opportunity to see themselves in a positive manner, and not ideas that are used to negatively portray students from different cultures. That this board continue to support all and create an inclusive climate within our school district that includes all children of all colors, even those with disabilities and special needs. I attended the last school board meeting and was frankly appalled and chewed the inside of my jaw at some of the claims made by parents on what is supposed to be happening or not happening in our schools. I do believe that all parents want the best for their child. I do believe that all parents want their child to succeed in academic setting. How the district travels that path is often not going to please everybody. But I think we can all agree that we need to do what is best for our students. There were complaints of porn being taught in class, not accurate. Marxism ideals being promoted in the schools, not accurate. And the list goes on regarding everything from technology to hiring practice and test scores. Clearly, inclusion and diversity have different meanings to different folks. Clearly, the thought of the actual history of this nation and the systemic policies in place have a different meaning to different folks. This is why we must continue to train our teachers on the best practices to include all our children. I believe that whitewashing this nation's history and discounting the achievements that all cultures contributed to this country's foundation serves no purpose in today's world. Let's not continue to sugarcoat the history or omit the history, and then when we bring it back up, then we're doing, what is it? Oh, we're canceling the culture. Hello, that's the history of this country. For the teachers and parents who are supposedly not in favor of the facts being taught, I question why. I suggest that all of us concentrate on improving our teachers, our students' test scores, closing the achievement gap that we haven't done much with. Every time I get up here, I have to remind y'all that gap's still there. And working together to make Springfield Public Schools the best public school system in the state. I got time left. I'm curious about the remarks being made about the hiring of the new superintendent and the new principal of Central High School and the selection process and the transparency. Well, I don't ever recall this board advertising how they were hiring or the credentials of anything until it was done. So I have a real issue with what is the reasoning for all of a sudden, y'all don't like how the hiring went. It's how it's always gone. Then, so there is no transparency on hiring. Nothing different was done this time than it's been done in the past. So if you have an issue with this time, then you need to dig a little deeper on what that issue really is about. Everybody has opinions on systemic racism and, oh, I'm not going to touch that one. Systemic racism is very much embedded in our culture. It is why we have the healthcare disparities. It has nothing to do, it's systemic and it's there. That is all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cheryl. I don't know if it's Mike Aton.
I skipped, thank you.
You're passing?
Yes.
Okay. Emily Hahn. Good evening, Emily. Welcome.
Hi. I'm here tonight as a SPS parent and as someone who cares about marginalized students in Springfield. I believe having teacher trainings about creating equitable learning environments is of vital importance to the effectiveness of educators in our schools, and especially as our community continues to grow in diversity. I personally have spent several years working to become educated about people who have different life experiences from mine. While I have avoided conversations about critical race theory because I believe it is simply a distraction, recently I have noticed increased tension about this issue, so I decided to study CRT for myself. Here are some things I've learned. First, each of these institutional acts predate CRT. Race-based chattel slavery, the Indian Removal Act, anti-miscegenation laws, the Chinese Exclusion Act, Jim Crow laws, the re-enslavement of black people under the 13th Amendment, segregation, the Tulsa Massacre, Mexican repatriation, Plessy versus Ferguson, voting test, Japanese internment camps, redlining in real estate, and the list could go on. Second, in studying CRT and our nation's history and government, I cannot escape the overwhelming whiteness of the leaders who made the decisions on this list. Decisions that have created advantage for their descendants and others who are classified as white, while disadvantaging people of color. One of the jobs of educators is to learn the far-reaching consequences of these and other decisions, and how they have created systems that continue to exist, replicate, and impact students from marginalized groups. How can we expect teachers to effectively reach students if they don't understand these frameworks? The truth is, most marginalized people don't need CRT to explain the systems that marginalize them and the long-lasting effects of decisions made about their lives in our country before CRT was created, or to understand new policies that have been developed since. These realities are present in their everyday existence and family histories. For people like me, who do not know these things experientially, and who also benefit from ignorance of these systems, the framework of CRT can be one tool to aid in our understanding. It's important for our teachers to have knowledge of the experiences of students from marginalized groups. I know these trainings may at times be challenging. However, silencing those working to equip our teachers on these issues does not create equity, but instead strengthens the framework of systemic racism. Crying CRT is a tactic of avoidance. If talking about race makes us uncomfortable, we can simply label it CRT and give ourselves permission to ignore inequality. But in doing this, we fail to truly understand the barriers that exist for SPS students, and we do not serve them well. Some here have said we should be more concerned about our grades and test scores. I hope that we have elected a school board that has the wisdom to understand that marginalization and test scores are in fact closely connected. Teachers educated in understanding the barriers students face will be more effective in helping overcome them. It was only 2 years ago that I sat in a room to listen to SBS students from marginalized groups share stories of discrimination they experienced in school. The catalyst for that event was several publicized racist incidents, including an SBS student saying in a video that his black teammates should be lynched. His words carried the weight of the history of that terroristic act inflicted repeatedly on the black community. Racism and other types of discriminatory behaviors are an issue in our schools. On a personal note, my view of race in our country is derived from studying history, listening to the experiences of generations of marginalized people, and witnessing the impact of discrimination against people whom I love. As a Christian, the Bible shapes how I respond to injustice, and as Justin Giboney, founder of AND Campaign, said, I'll continue to denounce the parts that are unbiblical and affirm what is sound. That's what Christians do with any theory or systems made by human hands. Centering the problematic parts of CRT, when black Christians have been faithfully addressing the issues for hundreds of years before CRT was around, is a way of discrediting the entire conversation. It's overly simplistic and evasive. And Bernice King has warned, we will never get anywhere if we keep debating the framing of injustice instead of working to eradicate injustice. Finally, it seems worthy of noting that many upset with CRT and calling it Marxism also quote Martin Luther King Jr. They seem to be forgetting that over 60 years ago during the struggle for civil rights, Dr. King was dismissed as being a Marxist. As we know, history does not look well on those who opposed him. May we seek to find Springfield Public Schools and the educators in its system equipped to face the future, embracing understanding of diverse social groups and landing on the right side of history. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next public speaker on agenda items is Alice Garber.
Hello.
Good evening, Alice.
I am not a parent or a student, but I'm here because I am very worried about the attempts I'm seeing to undermine what's going on with our schools' equity and diversity training.
Alice, can you move here?
Here. We know that we have an achievement gap. We actually have several achievement gaps. Black and brown students are not getting what they need to perform the same as white students. Poor students aren't doing as well as middle class and wealthy students. Special education students aren't supported like mainstream kids are. None of that is up for debate. I don't need to walk you through all the statistics because it's common knowledge. Addressing it is part of your jobs. Those problems are real. The reasons for those problems lie in the ways that our culture and our institutions have been structured to prioritize only white, wealthy, abled people. And again, that's something we know. We can't say that we don't know that. It's not up for debate, it's a fact. Our country and our city have a history of racism. Our schools were segregated until 1955, and systems like that leave a legacy that won't go away overnight. I have had the advantages in life that I do, partly because in the 50s, my grandmother went to the white school, and she had resources that my black classmates' grandparents didn't have. So to fix the achievement gaps, we have to address the history and the habits and the social norms that hold some kids back and give others a leg up. And to address those systems, we have to describe which kids are being helped and which kids are being harmed. We have to say that the white kids are getting an advantage, because if we don't say that, we can't identify that racism is even there when it's right in front of us. So when you hear somebody objecting to teachers getting diversity training, saying, oh, look at this oppression matrix, this is making me anxious to look at, what you're hearing is that they don't think we should call the problems that prop up our existing achievement gaps for what they are. The problem is racism. The problem is classism. The problem is ableism. It doesn't go away because we don't put a name on it. It just is harder to fight if we can't admit that it's there. You've heard the argument that categories are dehumanizing, but you know what's really dehumanizing is being told that generation upon generation of discrimination and disinvestment and violence doesn't matter as much as whether some teachers feel kind of anxious for a couple of hours because they're looking at a piece of paper and having to admit that they've had some advantages in life. That's not the same, and that should not be the priority. So folks are saying that they don't think we should fix the problems that have plagued us for generations that are holding our kids back right now, because how in the world are you going to fix a problem if you cannot talk about what the problem is? It's not acceptable. Every kid in Springfield deserves a good education, opportunities for their future, and the knowledge that their teachers and their schools value them just as much as they value all of their classmates. If we won't even talk about what's preventing that from happening, how can we say that we care about our kids at all? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker on agenda item is Pat Scott.
Good evening.
Good evening, Pat.
You've heard from me so many times, and I don't have any lofty ideas about, I do, but I'm not going to share them here, about CRT, racism, black and white. You have one job, and that's to educate our kids. Some of this may and should go back to the family, but I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I hope this new board will be able to make some decisions, learning from the past what has happened. When I have spoken at these meetings for at least the last 8 or 9 years, as our current superintendent made changes in our district, from knocking out walls to put 2 classes together, 60 kids, where they can't hear, or putting garage doors up, or putting the Chromebooks in everybody's hand, I still think it needs to be out of K1, 2, and 3. And so now, 8, 9, 10 years later, we see the results. And I hope the board has learned. I never understood how you can go and extend contracts, give pay raises. I mean, some of the things we're hearing are lofty ideas, and I'm for those. But get back to the basics of what we need to do about educating our kids. And we've, I believe, made so many mistakes in the past, and I hope those are not repeated in the future. And I see some changes already. I don't have to tell you what your job is. You have a superintendent that you will be supervising, and it should be your wishes that go to that superintendent based on fact what should happen in this district. And I hope that happens. I really hope that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Our last public speaker on agenda items is Monica Horton. Good evening, Monica.
Good evening, everyone. To the board, thank you for allowing me to be here, to the administration, and to everyone who's here. I just was really happy to pull up, and I saw a whole foyer full of people, and I didn't realize that they were school nurses, as well as individuals being honored. And I'm actually just here to acknowledge that there was a PE teacher on last Friday who made a recommendation for a family movie night for my family. And for me and my husband, you know, we grew up in the 90s, so we were heavily into the game Mortal Kombat. And so the movie Mortal Kombat came out on this past Friday, and we thought that that would be appropriate for my daughter to watch. Well, we got 30 seconds into the movie, and it was extremely violent, and it was just too much for her. And so she made a recommendation. She made a family movie night recommendation through the recommendation of her PE teacher at Academy of Exploration. You all know who that person might be, but I don't know who that person is, and I was hoping that they were being honored perhaps on tonight. That movie was called Finding Ohana. And to all of us who have children in this room, I encourage you to go home and watch it. And if you do not have children, I still encourage you to go home and watch it. And I would like to think that this PE teacher went through some diversity training. Thank you, Dr. Ravanya Garcia-Pizzateri, for implementing diversity training and rigorous diversity training to create awareness and to be able to allow for students who are not from marginalized groups, from majority culture, to be able to have more exposure to other cultures. And the reason why this was important and it meant so much to me and my family to have this movie night with this particular movie that was recommended by this PE teacher. It wasn't even, I mean, PE teachers are just as important as your math, your language arts. But the reason why this was important, if you don't know what the plot of this movie is, it's about a family who is from Hawaii. So they're Pacific Islanders. And the family had a father who served in the military. That individual passed away, and it caused for the family to be plunged into grief and loss. And it caused them to leave Hawaii, and they went to New York. And when they got to, when this family, this woman, she became a single mom after the dad died, and so when the family went to New York, they started, they kind of abandoned their culture, their heritage in a lot of ways, and the children didn't get a chance to really engage in that intergenerational type of experience that once they came back to Hawaii, because there was a health crisis with one of their elderly family members, the kids were able to re-engage with their history, with their culture, and with their heritage. And the reason why I like this particular movie as well is because to a kid, it looked like it was a treasure hunt. So there's kind of like these off stories that are happening in this movie. But it looked like that it was just about a treasure hunt. And by the time they found the treasure, they realized that it was so tied into the history and the culture of that particular island, and that it meant so much to their elder. And it caused them to leave New York and have the desire to come back home and to be where home was. And I think that taught my daughter a lot about the history of other cultures, increasing awareness, learning about the food that they were eating, the music that was attached to that particular culture. And I don't think my daughter has had very much exposure to individuals of Pacific Islander descent. So keep up what you're doing. We need to have diversity. We need to increase our cultural consciousness, because systemic racism, it's inbred into American culture. And continue on what you're doing. And by the way, I did not get the results that I would like to have seen on the board, school board. But I hope that those who are already on the school board can persuade people on the board currently to do the right thing.
Thank you, Monica. Our next agenda item is, our consent agenda. And the recommended action is that the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 through 5.01. And just as a reminder, these were presented to us during our study session, and we had 2 weeks to review these and ask any particular questions. So I've read the recommended action. Would somebody be willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Sharita? Is there a second? Second. Danielle will second that. Any discussion before calling for the vote? Hearing none, we are ready to vote. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is the treasurer's report. That brings our elected treasurer, Ms. Emery, to the podium. Good evening, Carol.
Good evening. So we have posted for you our normal reports for your pre-review, and I'll highlight for you just a few items. We do also include these in the items of interest report for you to observe as well. The recommended budget amendments for this evening's vote would include an increase of revenue for the operating accounts mostly of $3,962. And the expenditure change is an increase as well of $122,381. Most of the revenue change is relative to the release of state formula funds Governor Parson announced on March 1st, and the impact in Springfield Public Schools of the statewide $280.7 million was $4.1 million. So that's the primary impact. What that does for us is it changes our Estimated ending fund balance at June 30 from 17.35% to 18.43%. We have included the other reports that include the bond information as well as accounts payable, check listing, and a variety of other reports to meet requirements for educating you and our public. If you have any questions for me, I would be happy to answer those.
Okay, I'll take any questions for Ms. Embry at this time from board members. Okay, seeing none, I'll read the recommended action. The recommended action is that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented. Would somebody be willing to make that motion? Scott will make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Charles will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is information reports, for which there are none tonight. Our next agenda item is board policy, and we have no board policies brought forth this evening. That leads us to our next agenda item, which is new business, and that is our Missouri School Board Association Delegate Assembly. And I'm just going to take this time publicly to recognize that Charles Taylor will continue to serve as our MSBA rep on the board of the Missouri School Board Association. And I believe following our meeting during board comments, he has some updates to share as he's recently set in a board meeting just this weekend. So he'll share some comments. Denise Frederick and I are willing to continue to serve in those roles. We've been doing that. We did that last year. And Sharita is willing to serve as a delegate alternate this year for us. So just letting the board know that, making you all aware of that as we move forward with our information presented tonight. Our next agenda item is unfinished business, which brings us to our internal audit report for purchasing. Ms. Emery, will you please introduce this item?
And I will invite Mr. Sam Shriver with BKD LLC to join me at the podium. As you know, Mr. Shriver is a managing consultant with BKD, and he provided you with the draft report in closed session at the previous meeting. So Mr. Shriver will submit the report to you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank you again for having me this evening.
Good evening.
Ms. Carroll mentioned I'm here to deliver the final report for our latest internal audit, which was focused on the areas of purchasing and procurement processes of the district. One thing I want to point out that an internal audit is different from a financial statement audit, the latter of which is designed to express an opinion on financial statements. That's not what we've been engaged to do. We're just here assessing district processes and just offering recommendations for areas where we see possibility of improvement. Before we go into the report, though, I just want to thank Carol, David Pelletier, Cara Daniel, and all the individuals that we worked with us throughout this assessment. Everyone was very helpful, easy to work with regarding answering our questions or providing us the information that we needed. But moving on to the report, so the evaluation process consisted of interviews, inquiry, observation, analysis of documentation, and sampling as applicable. The areas and activities that we evaluated included the district's policies and procedures over purchasing, internal controls over purchasing, training programs over purchasing, effectiveness and efficiency of the purchasing process, district lines of authority. And we evaluate these engagements as either being satisfactory, generally satisfactory, or unsatisfactory. As you probably recall, this assessment received a satisfactory rating. And we previously discussed our observations in great detail back in closed session, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail here. But as you recall, there were 4 observations. The first one had a medium risk classification. That was the observation we noted where there was a change order out of the 30 we sampled that was not approved by the board, which is required per policy FEF-2. We recommended that staff involved in the change order process just be periodically retrained and be informed of any possible changes to the policy. Management agreed with our observation and said that steps will be taken to ensure staff are made aware of changes in the future. The other 3 observations, they were all classified as low risk. These observations just covered areas where we just identified areas of possibility of, identified some areas for a little improvement, but nothing of great concern to the district as a whole. But that's all I wanted to highlight. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay. I'll take any questions for our speaker. Okay, hearing none, we've had an opportunity to ask those questions, so we thank you for presenting this. The recommended action here for this agenda item is that the Board of Education accept the internal audit as presented.
So moved.
Sharita will make that motion. Is there a second? Carls will second it. Any discussion at this time before voting? Hearing none, we are ready to vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Sam, for you and your team's work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our next agenda item is our 2021-2022 Budget Development Capital Projects Fund.
Yes, we'll continue the journey. All right. So again, you see some familiar slides for you, and the first is the presentation schedule. So we're journeying toward that June 22nd board approval moment. Before that, we'll cover this evening's capital projects, then the general and teacher funds. We will provide you with the full budget presentation during the June 8th meeting, and then seek your approval prior to the start of the new fiscal year, July 1, at our last board meeting. Again. Just remind you of the funds that are managed by the district, the 5 separate primary funds and the 2 fiduciary funds. And for capital projects, the important thing to note is that it's primarily a fund balance carryover plus special revenues that are allowed to be directly receipted into that account, as well as the allowable transfer. And that guaranteed tax base calculation is provided to all districts throughout the state of Missouri each year. So we don't have to do the calculation. They tell us what we are allowed to transfer to the capital projects fund to cover needs within the district. Some districts may decide to set a levy in the capital projects fund. That has not been a path that has been taken, to my knowledge, in the history of Springfield Public Schools, but certainly an option if that is desired by the board. So types of expenditures include anything that we deem to not be consumable. So the threshold is set at $3,000 per item. I will qualify for you that anything that is federally funded, that threshold is $1,000 per item. And we have special asset inventory management that we embark upon with regard to taking care of all of these purchases that occur within the district. We're also required to code lease purchase payments to the capital fund, so any technology lease purchase that you've approved recently would be coded there. And then certainly any major building improvements or purchases of land, those are required to be reported there. In our district, we report to you every month the bond funds separated out from the capital projects fund. When we report to the state of Missouri, those are collapsed together. So we might say that we view the bond fund as its own special fund as well. This shows you the historical expenditures in our district, and for those of you who may have been on the board during previous presentations, there were times in our district when decisions were made to invest as little as $1.3 million in our assets throughout the district. And as a reminder, we are managing over 4 million, close to 4.5 million square feet of buildings. And so that was a very low number. We have continued to address needs through a very systemic process that allows us to identify our capital needs. We utilize a special formula within the capital forecast software that identifies the aging process. We still apply common sense and evaluate all of those needs, whether it be roofs or parking lots, that type of thing. And so you can see different spikes. FY19, we saw a spike because of an additional investment in safety improvements, and then FY20, we were catching up because there were a number of projects we were able to perform that had been rolling from years prior that we could then get in the buildings when we were shut down. So we have that capital planning process where leaders submit the needs, and so whether you're a building principal or a department leader, you have the ability to submit a work order. And then the operations team works collaboratively with the instructional leaders to ensure that we're prioritizing appropriately and meeting the needs of our district. And some of the work of the operations team might include ensuring that whatever the request is in compliance with building code, because that matters. And also, we take a look at what might be on the horizon from a facility master plan planned project that we wouldn't want to have disrupted by wasting any dollars in dealing with the problem. Might Band-Aid something for just a brief period of time. So I include this slide mainly just to help you get your mind around the fact that while we go through this process every fall to identify the needs, the capital needs within the district, our ability to spend the funds often is the next year and the year beyond that. So for instance, if the capital planning process in the fall prioritized a specific need that would be a disruption to instruction if we didn't wait until spring break or wait until the summertime, we're going to continue to work on scheduling that in such a way that we don't interrupt the work that's going on in our buildings that's most important. And so I look at it as a rolling budget. So it's never a surprise to us that at the end of the year we have a certain number of projects that aren't completed. So then that budget will then roll into the next year. We'll have a significant shift of the budget from year to year dependent on the delivery of the work. I mentioned the capital forecast software and the life cycle replacement, and so I mentioned roofs and parking. That's also about our white fleet and our bus fleet and any other primary category of expenditure. We also have allocations for certain areas and then prioritize within that. So these slides each help you understand some of the identifications that have been made already for prioritizing capital needs. And every year you know that we do prioritize a significant amount for our bus purchases. It's important that we maintain an operable bus fleet. And you can see we have information here regarding maintaining the average fleet age of 9 years and a maximum of 16 years. And so we continue to evaluate each of those buses. Engines also must be replaced from time to time, and they carry a fairly significant price tag of $20,000 on average. We invest a significant amount in replacing our cafeteria tables and other furniture throughout the district. And so we have, for instance, custodial teams that are keeping their eye on failing cafeteria tables because we want to make sure our employees are safe, that our kids are safe, and so we provide that allocation each year. Electrical and interior, that can be a variety of work. We've listed for you some primary projects for your awareness, like bathroom renovations and fire alarm panels. And all of that work is identified by not only people within the buildings and the spaces, but also our operations team working collaboratively together. Exterior and grounds, we have $870,000 identified, and some of those needs are listed there. Flooring, $200,000. Gyms and fields, $1.5 million, and that's to address replacement of turf and resurfacing track. Again, it's about keeping students safe. And we have bleachers at Pitkin as well. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, $1,836,839. You know that we had previously brought to you for approval that McGregor boiler system total replacement. So this is identified as part of the actual approval this coming year, but it was one of those situations where we had no recourse but to move more quickly so that we'd be ready to make that happen in the summer. So some of those approvals come to you at varying periods of time as well. Information technology, $1,662,000, and this includes that annual refresh of devices and upgrades in our infrastructure as well. Nutrition services, we've carved out $93,000 to replace equipment there, and you can see the list, standard equipment that you would expect to find in a kitchen. Playgrounds, we have an allocation for $300,000, and we're making sure that all of our playgrounds are addressed for age appropriateness and needs appropriateness and accessibility in general. I realize, there are page numbers on these slides, but it's very faint, and I think I need to fix that moving forward. Roofs, $1.5 million. Again, our team goes through an evaluation process to identify what is next in the queue. tuck pointing. So this is work that must happen oftentimes. If you have windows that are leaking, that type of thing, you likely need to have some tuck pointing done, and it's just repairing the building surface. And then once we do the tuck pointing, we go inside, and there would be an interior component of that as well to repair any damage that had taken place. So these are the sites that have been identified for some work there. Our white fleet, we have an allocation of $400,000, and again, we work on ensuring that we're providing an appropriate average age for those vehicles. We probably ought to change out this slide if that vehicle has indeed been replaced. The lease for our annual technology information is indicated at just under $3 million for the upcoming year, and that includes the renewals that have recently occurred. We also eliminate whatever the decrease was from any leases that have been paid off. So this shows you our current estimated balance report with regard to capital projects funds. And we are continuing to work through that process. We're very close to landing the capital projects recommendation for next year, but we don't have that official one for you. This does show you the full listing of all those items I just covered for you. So that comes in at just under $14 million for the upcoming year. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, I'll take any questions for our speakers at this time.
I have a clarification question.
Sure.
So, just so I'm clear, when we have emergencies like McGregor or over at Bingham, that comes out of this fund?
It does. We typically have a contingency, so as you can see on this slide, we have a contingency of $250,000, and if that were not sufficient, then we would ask you for special budget approval.
And when I think maybe it was last year, we rolled over, I think, for the fleet and maybe some buses. When we roll over on the next year, do we increase the budget amount for those categories?
So it's really dependent on the need, and I don't have in front of me the actual change column. That will be information that I'll provide at an upcoming budget meeting, but it's usually pretty close, and what we do is we ascertain what is the cost of replacing a 77-passenger bus based on the current market, and then extrapolate from that based on how many buses we need to replace. So it does vary from time to time, but that's a great question.
I'll take any other questions for Carol at this time.
When you're planning, when you're doing the capital budget planning, how far out do you go? Is this the next year, or do you go out
Right.
5
So
years, 10 years, 20 years?
we have a variety of schedules, if you will.
Right.
And actually, anytime we go through a bond rating from Standard & Poor's,
Right.
we get to talk about all the things that we do, and that includes these schedules that some go out 20 years, some may go out 5 years. It really depends on what the particular equipment is. But certainly for roofs and parking lots and other primary structures, we have a 20-year plan so that we have a column that tells us exactly how much we really should be budgeting for each year looking ahead.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Miriam.
Actually, can I ask Sharita to clarify? I didn't understand what she meant by rollover. Does that mean something that was budgeted for and then was used, or was budgeted for and was not used? I didn't understand the question, and I didn't understand the answer.
So, if I'm correct, and I could be wrong, I think when we did budget for last year, we did not allocate the money for the white fleet trucks and a bus, or some buses. That line item was cut, and because of some other budgetary needs.
Oh, I see. So it was on the budget, but then it got cut.
In our pre-planning, it was part of it, and then we reduced that down.
So then it got rolled over
because of
to
the
this
uncertainty that was before us. And so we pulled back a little bit and thought, okay, we can hold off on, these are not critical, they're necessary. And then those items, though, that wouldn't have made the cut, if you will, then are next in the queue because they needed to be replaced.
So these figures were from the previous year that just kind of got rolled over, but updated with new figures considering what it would cost today.
It's always this rolling list of items that continue to bubble up to the top and is reevaluated each year to make sure that we are hitting the mark on those needs.
Thank you, Sharita. I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, seeing no more questions at this time, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is our bond project updates and actions. The first item is change orders and agreements.
Yes. So I will present this information for you this evening. Dr. Shaw is not able to be with us. And this is actually a very small recommendation. The total for change orders and agreements is $391,134.77. And as you can see, the information has been broken down by site. It does include some furniture, fixtures, and equipment for Boyd and for Williams. And then for the storm shelters, there is architectural and engineering work that has been recommended. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer that. Or I'll do my best. How's that?
Do we have any questions for Carol before I read the recommended action? Okay. The recommended action is that the board approves the change orders and agreements as presented.
So moved.
Sharita will make that motion.
I'll second.
Denise will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is real estate easement, Jarrett Middle School property.
Yes. So this is typical business. It's not something that happens frequently, but in this situation, as you know, the new Jarrett Middle School is being erected on the Portland site, and there's a necessity that Southwestern Bell AT&T relocate the structure for communications infrastructure that they had on that site. And so in order for that to be allowed, we must provide them a real estate easement. And for our new board members, I want to share with you and remind our previous board members that any action with regard to real estate must carry a vote of 5 board members. So the calculation is actually 4.6 and beyond, but all real estate actions, regardless of the number of board members that are present. So we have this recommended action for you. This has been vetted by our attorney, and that's our standard process, whether it be contracts and agreements or a special easement such as this. The action is that the board authorize and approve a permanent easement for communications and telephone purposes to Southwestern Bell AT&T for a small rectangular area on the Jarrett School property. The president of the board is authorized and directed to execute the easement on behalf of the district. And for clarity, the board president does always sign all real estate transactions.
Is someone willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Danielle will make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Scott will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Carol, for those agenda items. And that leads us to our next agenda item, which is public comments to address non-agenda items. And Kathy, I believe I have those in front of me at this time. The Board of Education will allow comments on topics not related to the printed agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes each for each speaker and will be timed by the board secretary. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the schools or in the district office. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to comments and or concerns from the public, but will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. If you have materials that you would like to share, please provide them to the board secretary prior to speaking, and she will distribute those to the board members. Our first public speaker on non-agenda items is Arthur Hodge. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm an old soldier at this, so I'm going to talk about this stuff. In Mississippi, I grew up there, so I can tell you some stories. As I've stated quite often, schools are not a panacea. Yet schools are charged with educating future generations, which means it strives to educate those who desire to be educated, along with caring parents. You got to have the parents. The system has failed black students since the late 1960s. In this modern day society, the system is out of touch with black students. How many times has the system talked with black students about their desires and wants? How much money is wasted on Band-Aid programs slated to help black children. What is this equity and diversity? What is it? Blacks are a diverse group themselves, so how are we going to deal with them? Educate them, there would be no worries. Tell the true story. Who is in charge? There are too many loose ends. If there's any investment in children, let it be a real one. Teachers need to be teachers, not a cure-all. Children are our most sacred future. Toyed, and education has toyed with that future for a long time. Now it is time to step up to the plate and do the right thing. There's a must to support our teachers in educating our children. We need to defend the role in helping our black students. Most are not equipped. When they come here, we never check on them. They just float through the system upon arrival. Also, our Hispanic kids, many of them are way behind, but we come up with other stuff in this equity and diversity place. We need to educate our children. The concern, I pray that you give this concern some consideration. Also, I brought about the discipline and the food service program needs to go back to the school district and let them take care of the cooking and preparing meals for our children. They get the same stuff every day, pizza, pizza, pizza. And also hard copies. I tried to help a young student today. No hard copies in the school. No books. What is going on? What is the real agenda? Please tell me. What is the real agenda? And then the time change, so I hope you all think about that. And thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'm not here to castigate or ostracize you, but our black children need help in Springfield, Missouri. And I'm not from here. I grew up in Mississippi, but I found some wonderful people since I've been here. And I've noticed that we need to help our Hispanic children. Many of them are so far behind. We've had social promotion, and I only got 1 second, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Arthur. Our next public speaker on non-agenda item is Mary Jesnick.
This is Mary Jesnick.
Thank
I'm
you.
a retired school teacher, former board member of 3 boards elected. All elected board members are representatives of the voting and taxpaying community. This community disavows critical race theory, Marxism, and the education race to the bottom in the world community. This community wants Americanism, the United States Constitution, reading, math, and writing taught by teaching staff without indoctrination of Marxism. They do not wish their children to be subjected to pornography at any age. You are required to listen and to vote according to the voters' wishes. If you refuse to follow this simple requirement as an elected official, recall can and will follow. Now, just as a background, I'm a Chicago public school teacher. I have taught inner city Racine, Wisconsin. I am a graduate, a master's degree graduate. Dean's List, Savannah State College. Savannah State College is not a white college. I know my history. I know the history of this country, and I know it from all aspects. It is not color. As a veteran, we all bleed the same color. And when we're on the battlefield of education, our children are the ones that we are protecting. They are the ones that need to hear how to read, how to do math, how to have comprehension skills. And we're not teaching it now. And the reason I know that is I also am a tutor at Smitty's boxing gym on the north side, where the children come and need help. And they receive it from a teacher who has been educated and has child growth and development skills and knows how children learn. I am sad to say that my hours there are really reteaching everything that you should have been taught, they should have been taught in school. It is impossible that a third grader cannot multiply, subtract, add, divide, have no idea about fractions, because it's not being taught. I'm sorry that I refuse to be a tutor in this school district because I don't teach from computers. I teach children the way they need to be taught, and that is not with a computer.
Our next public speaker is Teresa Drusa, sorry. Good evening, Teresa.
Good evening. Article 1, Section 5 of the Missouri Constitution addresses religious freedom. It states that no human authority can control or interfere with rights of conscience, that no public school student shall be compelled to perform or participate in academic assignments or educational presentations that violate his or her religious beliefs. When you push pornography, gay literature, and abortion in the schools, you are violating the Constitution. My request to have the perks of being a wallflower removed from curriculum was denied. They said the book was appropriate. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read to you what they deemed appropriate. He forgot the condom, so they did it doggy style with one of the sandwich bags. CB got so drunk at a party that he tried to fuck the host's dog. I have appealed their decision. It is eerily uncanny how the goals of communism, written in 1958 in the book The Naked Communist, match what's going on in Springfield schools. Here's one you'll like. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as natural, healthy, and normal. Belittle all forms of American history. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. And my grandson didn't have a choice in this book, and he wasn't offered to opt out. And another thing you did, last year you put all the black students on a bus, you took them over to MSU and indoctrinated them, and when they came back to Glendale, everybody was a racist. You're pushing hate, and you're pushing a racial revolution in this town. One of those black boys was my grandson's best friend. He came to our house. He would call us up, and he would say, "I'm hungry. Can I come over and eat?" And he was always welcome. There were 3 families that took care of this kid. He was failing, and you pushed him through and pushed him through, and he finally graduated, but then was unable to pass the test to get into the military.
Thank you, Teresa. Our next public speaker is Kyler Sherman Wilkins. Good evening, Kyler.
Good evening. Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Dr. Kyler Sherman Wilkins. I'm a professor at Missouri State University. I teach sociology classes, and I'm very much committed to diversity and inclusion. Though today I want to speak specifically about the issue of LGBTQ inclusive curricula. I think it's really interesting, this notion that people are pushing hate, and the only thing that I heard was hate and anti-trans and anti-gay rhetoric coming from members of this public. What I want to start off by saying is that a lot of the pushback in terms of public comments against LGBTQ inclusive curricula tends to come from, at best, a lack of understanding of what it means to be gay and trans, and at worst, unabashed, unapologetic homophobia and transphobia, right? A lot of the evidence, so in terms of beliefs and opinions, we can all have those, but I'm a social scientist. I deal with data. I deal with studies. The research is very clear on this issue. LGBTQ inclusive curricula, exposure to gay themes and gay characters does not I repeat, does not increase the likelihood that someone will identify as gay, lesbian, or trans. There is no relationship between that. Okay? What LGBTQ inclusive curricula does do, however, according to research conducted in 2019 by researchers at the University of Arizona, Texas A&M University, University of Minnesota, was that having this curricula actually makes communities safer. It leads to lower levels of victimization and harassment, and it leads to lower levels of bullying. Also, very important to note is that including this curricula increases children's levels of acceptance and tolerance. We spend a lot of time talking about education and its roles of teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that's absolutely true. But school systems also teach children how to be well-functioning, contributing members of society. In order to do that, you have to understand that there are people who do not look like you, people who do not believe the same things that you believe, and people who might be trans and LGBT, and that is perfectly okay. And I want to end my comments with saying something else that I think I just can't let it stand. There was a comment that there is no evidence for systemic racism in medicine. This is a lie. There is quite a bit of empirical evidence. If you look to the National Institutes of Health, if you look to the American Medical Association, there are a lot of studies that show systematic bias and oppression for people of color. I will gladly provide those links to anyone who would like to read them, but there is clear empirical evidence linking systemic racism to patient outcomes. My college freshmen can quickly Google Scholar to find these articles, and I suggest you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lola.
I'm going to pass my chance.
Okay, thank you, Lola. Our next public speaker is Carl Hirsch. Good evening,
Greetings.
Carl.
Who said patience is a virtue? Anyway, ACT scores, lowest in 10 years. Below state average and below national benchmarks. Why? I believe our 12 students are more than capable. You as a board can solve this problem. Do not put this off on the new superintendent. Please step up and lead. To further understand the problem, I refer to News and Leader, April 23rd, 2020. Best high school scores in Springfield metro area. I submit that learning is cumulative. Knowledge for ACT tests builds from K through the day you take the test. Do not use COVID as an excuse for low ACT scores. Remember, Missouri and the nation took the same test. May I submit 5 reasons that contributed to these low scores? They're not the only reasons, but they're 5. Number 1, take notes. Open classrooms. Go back 7 years. These students are now taking the ACT test, and you know the results. Number 2, too much technology, too much screen time. Do your homework. Look at teachers, and there are those who don't follow the Chromebooks to a T. They do their own thing. Just check it out. Look at those whose students have the higher scores. What were their methods? What about textbooks? What a novel idea. Number 3, look at curriculum content. Also look for schools with the best results. York Elementary, you know the story there, compare it to Fremont. It's both North schools. How much time is spent teaching versus satisfying administrative edicts? Number 5, discipline and cell phones. Could spend a whole hour on that. Time on track is what's important. Discipline problems, without discipline, you don't teach. In closing, learning is cumulative, and let's make teaching fun again. That's a slogan you might want to adopt. Thank you.
Our next public speaker is Tim Havens. Good evening, Tim.
Oh, hi. Welcome to the new members. All right, how about that? Better? Welcome to the new members, and seems like there's change in the air, and we've got new members on the board. We've got a new superintendent, new principal at Central High School. I've not been totally pleased with the way the school system has been run, but with this change, I think we owe it to these folks to give them a chance. And I think we may be coming on too strong and too loud, too public, and maybe if we have comments, we should make them in private for the time being and give them a chance, and then come back if we're not happy and discuss it in public forum. So I don't see what the critical racial theory has to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic. To me, it's almost more important that we get along socially and learn about inclusion, and it needs to be part of our school curriculum. I think people are speaking without really knowing, and they're too critical of this. And surely, from what we've seen, I would say Springfield needs a heavy dose of this type of thing. And we might as well start right now. Have a good community, and I think we can make the progress we need to make and the changes that we need to make. But we all have to appreciate each other's position. Everybody in this room wants the same thing. Every person on that board, every teacher are trying their best to get us a system that'll produce the ACT scores we want. But we can't distrust our motives. We have to respect each other's motives. So that's really all I have to say. I'd be glad to take unaccustomed questions.
All right. Any questions? So thank you, Tim.
Okay.
We appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Jenny Sledge, I believe. Did I say that correctly? Okay. Welcome.
We are family, right? Okay. So my second grader jumped in the car last week and said, guess who we learned about today? Louis Braille. He was so excited to share that he invented a way for the blind to read books. And I asked him what book his teacher read to the class about Louis. And he said, well, she didn't. The computer read it to me. My heart kind of sunk. That computer couldn't answer my second grader's questions. He couldn't learn from his classmates' questions. It couldn't stop and give examples of context for the information. He couldn't feel Braille on the glass screen. My son heard about Louis. He didn't really learn about him that day. But a few days later, his teacher had a doctor of prosthetics come to speak to the class in person during COVID. Amen! So he learned about his ability to help amputees. The information my second grader came home with from that guest was so much more real to him. He actually learned, he didn't just hear about prosthetics, he learned about prosthetics. Knowing I was going to share this experience with you tonight, I reached out to my son's teacher to make sure what I was sharing was the truth. Because I've had a teacher tell me, I'll believe half of what they tell me if you only believe half of what I tell them. However, you know how. Half of what they tell me, you tell me. Okay. So I reached out to her, and she told me, so I told her what he had shared, and she told me her screen, she had it all ready to share an interesting article and read it to the class as a group and learn about Louis Braille together. But her technology failed her. So the backup was for all the students to go to their individual Chromebooks and learn individually. But then she took the kids around the school where they were able to feel the Braille signs located throughout the school. We are so fortunate to attend an elementary school where our teachers are lovers of learning and they keep technology in its proper place. But this, however, is not every child's experience in SPS. These screens produce artificial intelligence. Our current test scores boldly reflect that. There is a spiritual realm to learning that requires nourishing teacher-to-student relationships. You've amputated the natural, organic process of learning for our children and replaced it with an artificial prosthetic in Chromebooks. Our children need and deserve genuine, authentic connections and relationships with their teachers and classmates. I am an optimist by nature. I want to see the very best in SPS. I have been a fierce defender of our teachers and board members, but I cannot in good conscience endorse the current heavy technology curriculum. The SPS district motto is engaging, relevant, and personal. And let's make it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move into our strategic updates reports, I've been asked if the board can take a 5-minute break to go to the restroom, and then we'll reset for our reports since we're 2 hours in so far. Does that work? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. It's Goal 1 mid-year update, and that brings Penny.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to provide you all with a brief update on Focus Area 2 Goal 1. I'm Penny Rector, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Human Resources Officer for the district. And Dr. Martha Dunnig, the Director of Learning Development, is with us this evening, and we are going to tag team, and we're here together so that we save some transition time and provide you with a very brief update on Focus Area 2 and the work that's been going on in this arena this current school year. And we want to make sure that we hit just a few highlights for you. We know that you've had an opportunity to read the report and want to just focus on a few of those highlights and next steps. You all know that we have 5 focus areas, and you'll be hearing from ours and Focus Area 3 this evening. Focus Area 2 is really directing our attention to the culture that empowers our employees and ensuring that we have a qualified and effective staff of teachers, leaders, and support personnel in the district. And to support that work, we have identified 8 strategies, and we will hit just a couple of highlights on each of those 8 strategies with you this evening. First is strategy 2.1.1, which brings up Martha.
Yeah, and so what we know is when we have new educators to the system and new leaders, we want to provide ample support to really bridge previous experience to the experiences within our system. And so the great celebration is even in a pandemic, we've been able to continue our early career support program called Step Up for close to 200, about 180 early career teachers in their first 2 years. While there has been a lot of pivoting with how to provide learning and coaching support if we are not face-to-face, our team has been highly successful with that. So that's a great celebration and continues to be really important work for the system so that we really are below the national attrition rates of losing educators, and we really are above in really having distinguished teachers that are ready to be the best that they can be for their students regardless of where they are in their journey as an educator. And then in addition, we also continue our Evolving Leader Support Program for all of our early career leaders in the system as well. All of these supports are in alignment with state expectation for early career mentoring, coaching, and learning. And so we will just continue to refine and use lots of data points to make sure that the programming we provide is exactly what our early leaders and teachers need.
I forgot to remind our board members to jot down notes, and we'll ask questions at the end. So sorry about that.
Thank you. Focus Area 2.1.2 really looks at our higher education partners and the recruitment efforts in the district. And just a note for you today that we continue to look at the ways in which we advertise and recruit. With COVID, we've been able to host drive-in, drive-up, drive-through, and drive-a-bus events just to get people out and engaged in our system, and it has activated some interest. We will continue to try and identify really unique ways to draw candidates into our district, not only for our teaching positions, but for transportation, nutrition services, and other positions throughout the district. We continue to partner with our universities for student teacher placements, and we continue to hire through those ranks. And you'll see later that our new teachers, many of them come through the student teacher ranks in our district, and we really appreciate that support. We're going to continue to those partnerships, look for ways to further engage with higher ed so that we have more of those students, those future teachers, coming into our classrooms more frequently, because we know that if we can get them into our classrooms to experience our students, they're more likely to choose SPS when they're looking to take that next step into their educational careers. Then 2.1.3 really does look at what we're doing to recruit an effective, qualified, and diverse workforce. And one of the strategies that we've utilized for the last 6 years is that early notice incentive program, and we're pleased to report today that that program still continues to be a very strong method of notification for us. So we identify retirees and resignees early in that process so that we can get to the table and hire early, which is a next strategy that we utilize in the district. We like to do that hiring in that early phase, January through June, but we really focus on that January through April timeframe when the candidate pool for teaching staff is at its peak. It is at its most robust, and that goal is 60% by May 1 with 90% by July 1. We have hired a number of teachers to date, but we also know that this year has been very unique for us, and so we will see in a bit that we've had fewer positions posted early as we reassess needs. Staffing is directly contingent upon student enrollment, and so we have deferred some hiring early. But you will see that we have hired those that we were aware of and able to hire early in this process. And so here at 2.1.3, you're going to see that we have fewer applicants on the certified side this year, but it's directly correlated to fewer positions being posted as we've identified the need. Many of those postings early are our elementary teaching positions, and we know that we've had to make some staffing adjustments there, and so we have delayed posting. And we have a few elementary positions posted that we will be hiring for, but there is a direct correlation there between the number of postings and the number of applicants for positions. Likewise, we see a decline in the operations side on the number of positions posted to applicants. However, what we see here is a significant difference in the total number of applications as compared to the positions posted. So we know that we have work to do, and this is one of the areas where we're going to be trying to identify additional recruitment opportunities, strategies in which we can attract individuals into our district to support those needs in transportation, custodial, nutrition services. The need is not unique to SPS, and it is not unique to public education. We find that there is a significant need in our community, in our state, and in our nation for workforce, and this is where we can see that coming through in SPS. And so we have work to do there to further enhance those applicant pools and bring those staff into the district. And 2.1.4 really looks at evaluation and feedback for employees to ensure that we are supporting improved and enhanced performance in all of our positions throughout the district. You'll see that we've had nearly 5,500 evaluation or feedback opportunities for our teachers this year. This is down from last year, in part due to our being hybrid at times and then moving into a more seated environment. We've had attention focused on some other priorities, so we've not been able to get in the classroom as many times as we have in the past, but we have very strong evaluation of our teaching staff, and that will continue throughout the rest of this year. Our deadline is May 15th for our teachers, our tenured teachers, to have those final evaluations completed. And so one of our next steps here is Dr. Nicole Holt is leading a review of our leadership performance standards, and once that work is completed, which we had hoped to continue this year, but we've been on a bit of delay, those findings will help to inform those leader standards that will be utilized in upgrading or updating our leader evaluation tools, which will then really filter into some modifications in other evaluation processes moving forward.
And so another key piece to supporting our educators and our leaders is really through the realm of professional learning. And so again, the good news is we have found ways this year to really provide just-in-time job-embedded professional learning to our teachers based on what they are saying they need most or what their students need most. And so in compliance with state expectations, we administer the professional learning needs assessment annually. That just happened, and that window closed, and that data is currently being really looked through by the elected professional learning advisory to help make sure that the opportunities for summer and the following year and just ongoing are spot on to our needs. And really we invite educators to think about what is it our students need us to learn most as educators so that we are moving the needle for their student achievement. And so that's one piece of data that continues to drive professional learning. Throughout the year, we've provided opportunity for teachers to engage in professional learning based on the needs of the hybrid experience. And then in addition, some job-embedded professional learning out at the sites, really thinking about mathematical practices and expanding perspectives of how do we best provide rich mathematical experiences for students as we are moving forward with some new curriculum options for next year. And so our teachers have had lots of opportunity for just-in-time but relevant professional learning for them. In addition, we provide lots of professional learning opportunity for the individuals who support the educators. So that would be leaders, that's learning specialists, coaches across the system, individuals out at sites that really are nested up next to educators and helping with the greatest impact for students. And so we do have some summer professional learning opportunities coming up. We will continue to really think about how we develop our system as collaborative teams, and we're doing that work through the work of adaptive schools, and that is in developing leaders with the adaptive tools to be collaborators, inquirers, and leaders of learning, but then also some site teacher leaders will engage in that work as well. And so that's exciting work because our data shows that there's some discrepancies in how collaborative teams are working across our system, and we really want to we don't want pockets of excellence, we want high quality job embedded collaborative learning for every educator in the system. And so we're really working forward with that as well. And then Penny mentioned one of the highlights here is around the work of the leader standards that's being done in partnership with the Walls Foundation and the Principal Pipeline. And so what could be done in that area this year has been done. And then another piece that we're working on with leadership capacity is the SPS Connect Leadership Program. We finished the second cohort of aspiring leaders in December, and we are currently marketing and preparing for the launch of the third cohort. We are shifting the name, and it will be called the SPS Leadership Academy, which will be open to educators within our system who want to grow as leaders within our system and across our system. And so that is being marketed right now. Applications are accepted through mid-May, and then we'll move forward with that work in the coming year.
And 2.1.7 is our opportunity to say thank you to you for your support of our teachers and our staff through our compensation and benefit structure. We're really proud to say that SPS ranks first and second in all areas of our salary schedule, which supports all those teachers and others who are paid on that scale. And when we look at our bachelor's and our master's first step, we are first in the region in those areas. We also see that over lifetime, just considering compensation alone, not even thinking about the retirement benefit that comes to our certificated teachers as well, we see that the teachers who spend their career with SPS are at a financial advantage just in terms of compensation when you compare it to our regional peers. And so we thank you for your commitment, longstanding commitment to our teachers and our staff in our district. Something that's a little bit unique that we wanted to just mention briefly this year is the support that you have provided around COVID needs. And so the district was able to provide 10 additional sick leave days beyond those that were federally mandated for all staff. We also founded a very unique quarantine leave so that those employees who are exposed in the workplace had to quarantine, had paid leave, or were able to work remotely, and if they had SPS students who were exposed and the parent had to stay home with them, that was paid leave as well. And so that was a tremendous benefit. There are a number of other benefits that we've listed here on the slide as well as in the report for your review, but we want to say thank you for your commitment as well as we're dealing with these kind of difficult byproducts of COVID. You'll see that we did have 478 days of district quarantine leave used by 127 individuals, not highly used, but certainly important and effective for those employees who needed that leave. So thank you for that support. And we also, our next steps, we will be looking at those operations positions that we're trying to recruit for and identify whether there needs to be any sort of adjustment brought to you as a recommendation relative to salary or benefits. And then looking at the impacts of COVID-19 on our staff. Are there other things that we need to be doing from a benefit standpoint to meet the needs of our staff as we come through COVID into our new normal, whatever that may be. And then the last note for you this evening is around our culture and recognition. And tonight you had a tremendous example of our recognition program building up, and the school nurses, the great opportunity to recognize them this evening. That is just one example of the program that we have in place this year for the district, and that will continue throughout the remainder of this year. Many individuals recognized, including at each of your board meetings, and we appreciate your recognition of staff. Then we want to just mention a couple of highlights. Our fall 2020 Culture and Climate Survey went forward as we were coming back to school in the midst of COVID with lots of turmoil probably and lots of anxiety among our staff. We did see a decline in participation of about 350 employees, but as you look, you will see that in many areas we remain pretty steady in the responses from our staff. There are just a couple that I think that we will need to spend some time analyzing and really looking at how we might be able to change the trajectory of those responses, and that I am involved in the decisions that affect my work. We saw a 5% decline. I don't know that that is really unexpected in a time of COVID when none of us really know what to expect and we're having to make decisions just in time, sometimes daily changes that alter the course of our work and how we manage our day-to-day activities, but we will delve into that further. And then the one that is a particular note is I encourage my friends and colleagues to work for SPS. We did see a decline there as well, and so we want to delve into that to try and figure out what are some of the causal factors that are influencing those decisions. But as you see the other areas, we have great working relationships with our colleagues. We still feel inspired to do our work, and so those continue to be very positive outcomes for us in the district. Next steps, we're going to continue to work together on teamwork, collaboration opportunities to recognize staff, and with Mr. Stephen Hall's assistance, we'll continue to work through those recommendations from the communications work group to see how better we can recognize staff and support them in the district. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one. I'll take questions from the board. Sharita, you want to start?
I have a couple of questions. The first question is related to the compensation grid, thank you, charts. We compared the salaries to our regional partners or other schools. How do we compare to other schools that are more our size and our scope? Because our regional peers aren't really peers.
And so we have not undertaken that specific study, but I will say that we compare positively, but we can certainly gather that information and get you the specific comparison. I don't want to speculate on what those numbers might look like.
Thank you. A couple other questions. For your surveys, I'm thinking of the one from 2.1.4 or 5, I think 5. Yeah. And we talked about the 1,180 students, certified teachers took that assessment? And out of how many certified teachers?
So we just talked about this today. It's approximately 1,900, and that survey is really created and aligned to the professional learning plan that gets brought to the board every June. And it's really designed by teachers for teachers. And so the PL advisory every year thinks, how are we going to engage everybody and get all the voices? Once upon a time, it was a mandatory piece, and that's something the advisory is not a fan of at this point, but it is highly encouraged that take this survey, because this is what really informs this teacher-elected group to make recommendations for what we should be doing to support professional learning across the system.
I have a very similar question for the culture and recognition survey. Who takes that?
It is all staff.
All staff.
An opportunity to take the culture and climate survey that's referenced in 2.1.8.
And do you know what percentage of the 2,391 staff, what the larger number was?
You mean like teacher versus?
No, how many out of how many? So 2,391 took the survey out of how many?
So, how many staff? Approximately 3,600.
That's all. Thank you.
Denise, I saw your hand next.
Yeah, so I guess back to slide 11 on strategy 2.1.5, would that be you, Martha?
Yes.
Okay, so in looking at professional learning and thinking about some of what we've heard tonight and what I've heard teachers that reach out to me just talking about the some of their frustrations and some of their successes with trying to engage with kids over the last year. What of the professional learning that you've been providing to teachers, could you break that out into percentage of how much of the professional learning has been just helping teachers to handle virtual learning and how to make that work for kids? And have we even had an opportunity, or have we had the opportunity to work with teachers then getting back to the person-to-person, teacher-to-student instruction? And I know we've had a very odd year, so I know we really can't compare this year to what we have done in the past, but can you kind of speak to that?
So I can speak to the fact that it's very informal and it's very formal. And so what we ran as we launched second semester was a formal teaching and learning series, and it was 3 fast offerings every week with some veteran voices. We basically looked at what are some of the problems of practice and brought in some veteran voices to support that, and those were all Zoom sessions. We had close to, I think, 200 individuals engage in that over the course of about 5 weeks, and so that was like the just-in-time, let's hear from some masters who are figuring out how to do this. I would say a lot of the informal, though, comes in the role of the learning specialists, who there are 11 specialists and coordinators that are out supporting our 50-plus buildings in team meetings, in individual one-on-one coaching. And those aren't things necessarily that I have a quantitative measure for, but it's ongoing continuously. And I think if you ask anybody on our team, they would say, I've spent many of conversations troubleshooting, how do I best support my Monday, Tuesday students versus my Thursday, Friday? Now, how do I best bring all back in, but then also make sure that I'm doing targeted support for those that might be quarantined? And so there have been many of those conversations all year long. And I think in our structure of really amplifying professional learning communities, and on Wednesdays, sites were really taking the time late in the day on Wednesday to allocate to some collaborative learning at each building, so it was very job embedded. So there was a lot of that going on, but it wasn't necessarily formal.
And I'm just wondering if it was maybe more virtual in nature than the traditional instructional strategy of teacher students.
We definitely
Sign of the times.
Yes, and we definitely model, but then that's a piece of it too. If teachers experience a professional learning opportunity that might be via Zoom, but it is using lots of different tools, that would be kind of a layer of the, so what did you notice here, and how might that then shift in even with your practices with students?
Oh, Scott.
Yes. So, Martha, in strategy 2.1.1, you mentioned, and it's written in here too, about evolving leaders support the cohort, 23 new leaders via learning, mentoring, and coaching. You said you were going to analyze early data points and data gathered. And what is that data gathered? What kind of data are you looking at there?
So with our evolving leaders are our leaders that are new to a leadership position in SPS. Some might be brand new to a leadership position.
Right.
Others might be those coming from another, another district, lots of experience. And so there is some perceptual data every time that there's learning. We definitely look at retention and attrition data of our newest leaders staying. There is the data in how many hours in the mentorship is being spent, because every new leader has a mentor that's very job alike. So if you're a middle school principal, you're going to have a mentor that's middle school principal and the opportunity to engage. So there are multiple data points. Satisfaction and ability to feel equipped and high efficacy to go out and lead, whether you're a site leader or a department leader, all of those pieces come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Miriam?
I have a question. It was on slide 11, 2.15. I have a clarification comment and then a question. So you mentioned as part of professional development with respect to math curriculum, you said new curriculum options. But I just want to be clear, we don't have an option.
Not options, new curriculum implementation. So,
implementation.
the learning
Okay.
support cycle of doing a curriculum review and then evaluating and choosing and selecting what the curriculum will be. So in anticipation, we've been doing a lot of support to K-5 educators around the mathematical practices. And so instead of pulling for out of classroom professional learning, it's been extremely job embedded around mindsets in mathematics, and then how teachers are then thinking that through in their next math lesson and trying it out. Because we know the best way to bridge knowing and doing is the implementation, and if you're as close to it as possible when you're right there learning about it, either before school, after school, in your planning time, and then trying it out right then.
So you mean it's next year's curriculum is embedded in this year's curriculum?
It works anyway, because it's about mathematical mindset and the mathematical practices. So that's been a piece that we focused on.
So that's training by Zoom or training by?
That has happened. Sites have had some autonomy on whether or not leaders are leading that with their site via Zoom or going into team meetings and seated together. So the learning has been streamlined for all of us. We do some collaboration to learn around around the piece, and then we are out at sites supporting the learning. But there's been some autonomy to sites as to whether teachers engage via Zoom or face-to-face, and that has been to honor teacher need.
So is all of this that you're telling me about, is that what this is in the handout, not in the slides, ensure equitable and focused mathematical practices is? Wasn't sure what that meant.
Yeah, it's really to ensure that we're all coming with a very common foundation.
Okay, got it.
In language, marker words that mean the same to all teachers.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just make a comment. One, thank you for sharing your narrative in your presentation, as we've already read the PowerPoints and the white pages, so thank you for telling your story and the highlights. I also will say that on slide 18, you don't need to go to it, about the culture and recognition. I appreciate as a board member not just seeing the positive data that you share and celebrate, but also the data that reveals we need to do a little more digging. Not we, you all need to do a little more digging. And it's not just COVID, but there's some years there where there needs to be a little more digging on what exactly is going on there. So I just thank you for sharing and being transparent with the data that you share with us. Appreciate it.
Well, we thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Next up, I believe, is Ms. Embry.
That's right. Moving on to our next strategic plan update.
And I will let you, switching that out because you were much better at it than I.
Thank you, Penny and Martha.
Thank you all, guys.
Thank you.
Here's the great news. The great news is that we've already covered
A lot of
what
your
I'm reporting
report.
on, and as you read in the focus area report. So I am going to get the prize for
Jill?
fast delivery.
The quickest, no, just kidding. Put her on the clock. We've got 5 minutes. Just kidding. Oh.
Okay, so, yes, focus, is that starting in the right place? Oh, almost, okay. Focus Area 3, Goal 1.
Yes.
And as you know, there are 5 in total, and we provide that for you each time. So we are all about seeking, aligning, managing, and optimizing resources for improved student success, but certainly while remaining financially sustainable. Very important to all of us. So what I would highlight for you this evening, and as you noted in the slides, we do have 4 different strategies that we apply in this regard, and one is allocating those resources, maximizing revenue, and aligning expenditures. We also focus on operational efficiency, and so if you notice, there are differences in our report styles. A lot of the previous reports have data to share. We don't really have data. We talk about process and process improvement. The third one is compliance, and so that's where we get into talking about all the audits. And then lastly is our facility master plan and our equipment plan. And again, you've heard about that this evening. So I did include in this slide deck, because we are cruising toward the end of the fiscal year where we'll be talking about our revenues coming up, and this is to help you recenter on some information I've already shared plus some new information with regard to ESSER funds. So first, understanding that part of the work that we did this past year has been the implementation and utilization of CARES funds, and we've maximized those opportunities to the highest level. So while we reported to you there was approximately $6.5 million in the beginning, it ended up being closer to $12.5 million in the end, and we have drawn into the system $10.4 million of that total. There are a couple of grants that remain, and so I'm very thankful and proud of the teams of people that include Director of Business Services, Director of Technology, and others who are working together to make sure we're capitalizing on those opportunities. So it's been more work, but it's well worth it, and it's helped us create that financially sustainable path moving forward. So this provides you that list of all of those grants that or allocations that we have been provided. And again, some of them were special to SPS, and some were special because it's Greene County funding that we received, and then others were provided through the state of Missouri, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. So this is a reminder for you, and again, I reported on this during our January board meeting when we first started talking about the budget and current impacts and the work that we would be doing in the coming months. So ESSER 2, or Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, this allocation provides for our district $27.367 million, and the funds can cover expenditures beginning back to March 13th of 2020 and then lending all the way forward to September 30th, 2023. Now, here's something that is important to understand about federal allocations, and Dr. Frederick understands this to a high level since she used to do this work in SPS, but you spend it and then you seek reimbursement. So there are some additional complexities that come with these funds where we'll have to be thoughtful about the path that we take in utilizing them. So you spend, then you seek reimbursement, and that can run a month, 2 months, 3 months behind, right? So that can affect the cash flow and our fiscal year reporting as well, and meeting the deadlines for spending it. So the next steps with regard to acquisition of the American Rescue Plan money, we still do not have information yet with regard to our specific allocation. We've been told you can assume around this figure. We're right now calling it $58 million. Again, that's on top of the $12 million that we received so far and the $27 million for ESSER 2. So this is, we're referring to it also as ESSER 3, but those dollars are coming forward. And so we will be providing you with additional information in the coming weeks, but I want you to know is that we have had opportunity, and that included Dr. Holt, Dr. Jungman, and myself, to engage with Dr. Lathan on here is the path that we are currently laying out with regard to the planned spending that would ultimately be
recommended to the Board of Education and seek your approval. And we wanted to make sure that we were in alignment with her thinking, and we'll continue to vet these recommendations for her. We also inquired as to whether she wanted us to put a pin in it and work on that herself in the coming months, or if she wanted us to continue the work, because as you know, these all carry deadlines on spending, and so time is wasting if we do not stay focused on delivering some opportunities. And so with that, we are partnering with some of the people in our community. We're looking at how can we extend student supports through extended before and after school care, that type of work. So we're doing some of that. We're also looking at those emotional and other health supports that students may need. So we've got teams of leaders and other staff collaborating with members in the community to bring forward the best recommendation for how we would move forward with this recommendation. So that's a lot of the work that's going on, and we also continue to focus on the daily business, on how we're delivering meals to students and that type of thing. So we continue to celebrate great work that's taking place in our district every day. So with regard to operation efficiency, you're not surprised to see that the transportation expansion did make the highlight list, and we're thankful for that. I've shared with you in the past about the compensation study. We had that final piece that we've been working on, and a lot of work went into assessing the participation levels and students' engagement opportunities and what kind of training goes into all of that. And so we'll be bringing forward a recommendation on stipends, but we've got a number of people to collaborate with and discuss that recommendation with. So mostly it's been the work of Kara Stasel, Director of Business Services, Director of Athletics, Josh Scott, Director of Learning Supports, Allison Pilley. So we'll bring more to you soon. And so moving forward, obviously implementing that transportation expansion. And we're still in the process on implementing the time and attendance system in our district. So with compliance, you've heard all about it. The one thing I would highlight for you is that business continuity plan work. So we reported on that audit some time ago at this point, a few years ago, but it continues on. And so Bruce Douglas, our Director of Instructional Technology, continues to oversee and manage that. Part of that is this implementation of the phone system. And you may not know it, but we have phones throughout our district that on a routine basis completely fail, and there's no way to communicate in those buildings. And we are scrambling and taking a Band-Aid approach on that. And so this is great that we'll be getting the system upgraded. It does take a lot of money, but it's important for security and other measures. So follow-up audits, you know, we are all about bringing that to you. We'll continue that process, and next steps would be to provide you with the Human Resources audit for your review. Also, every year, EKD, Internal Auditing Services, will perform a risk assessment, and so each of you will have an opportunity. I believe they'll probably do it as a survey process. I believe that's what they did last year. In the past, they have actually met with and engaged with individual board members to just get your feel of what is it that you would like for us to audit in the coming months. And so that process will be occurring here in the next few weeks so that you can provide feedback. You know, we are bringing to you every single meeting recommendations for your approval to continue to move forward the facility master plan and the equipment planning work. And so this just highlights some of that, and obviously you are well aware of the next steps on that as well. So that is my report.
Okay, all right.
Wow.
I'll field any questions to Carol. Any questions at this time from the board?
Okay, this is really quick.
Sure.
So on ESSER 2, you had covered costs beginning March 13th, 2020 through September 2023. So do you think that's going to hold true for ESSER 3? Is that information out yet, or is that just not disclosed yet?
Actually, that's a great question, and one that we keep asking. We've heard a couple of different dates, but we're still awaiting that specific guidance. And I've heard 2024 potentially, and maybe even shifting off of the September 30 mark. So more to come, don't know yet.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm really hoping that they do something that gives us more time, because everyone is going to be seeking very similar services and products, and it will paralyze the system, basically.
Yes, Scott.
Okay, on slide 11, said implementation of Transportation Expansion Initiative effective with the start of the new school year. Maybe you could provide us an update. Has anything changed since the recommendation?
No, and actually, so February 9th was when the Board of Education approved that initiative, and thank you, sir, for serving on that committee. Actually, immediately following that, we activated the work with the design support group consultants to assist with the routing. What has happened in the system is we do have an implementation team that's working toward that end, and we did provide a survey to our parents so that they could, or guardians, so that they could advise as to whether or not their particular student who is eligible for transportation will be participating, because we want to route to the highest level in terms of making sure that we're providing not unnecessary routing and certainly meeting all the kids' needs. So that survey closes at the end of April, I believe, right, Stephen? And then we will then engage with our building leaders and their staffs to help us gather that information for any of those remaining student data points that we don't have. One thing that our communications team is also doing, they've continued to push out reminders to the specific people that had not yet filled out the inquiry, because our bottom line is we have to hear from everyone.
Yeah, that's my next question. What kind of response have you seen? You seen good response?
Yeah.
We've received over 9,400 responses so far.
Out of how many?
We'll continue with reminders this week, and then that's when the process begins individual outreach on the school sites.
So 9,400 responses.
Okay. Out of how many?
Of how many, Stephen?
We're asking for responses from everyone.
All students.
From everyone, Okay. I thought it was just those that were affected by it.
To the eligible students. So that will be part of our refinement of data.
Of those eligible for transportation.
Communication also did help apprise parents again of the likely changes in start times, and that was the reason for the comprehensive communication. But we will continue to refine that.
Great, thank you.
So that was to the people that qualify, not everyone.
Well, we also, yes, that is correct. One of the pieces in the communication was to verify the address, because we know that many people who are newly eligible may not be aware that they are. So we're encouraging people to enter their address, we're able to verify their eligibility, and then we're asking them to either opt in or opt out.
Do you have any idea what the denominator is of the people?
Not yet. So we're providing regular updates to transportation in terms of the number, but I know people will wait until they have that closed before they really punch the data at that point.
So I think what I'm asking is, so you have 9,400 responses. Is that of 23,500 students, or is that of
households? Are you asking?
Households. So the 9,400 is households.
Yes.
So that could be.
Actually, no, that's 9,400 students, because what we're asking is, when you email a household, there may be multiple students, and we're asking them to fill out the form for each and every student.
But you're sending it to everyone, not just people that are
Correct. Those initial communications went out
within
to all of
1.5
our students.
miles. You're sending it to even people that are closer in.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Because the first communication especially, we wanted people to understand and remind why we're doing this, why it's important. That message was important for everyone to hear, and we also wanted them to verify their address.
Okay.
They were new ready.
Great questions, and
Okay,
we will
yeah.
definitely have more data.
That's right. Right, so it is a big puzzle.
Yes.
For sure, yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your Focus Area 3 Goal 1 mid-year update.
My pleasure.
Right. We will move on with our agenda, which is report from administration, which is administration reports. So, Dr. Holt, would you like to share with us some highlights?
I would. Good evening, all. Good to see you. So I have a couple of brief updates about assessment testing, Explore, and then our student vaccine clinic that we're on. So, Explore update, reminder that is the summer programming that we run for our students. As of 8 o'clock this morning, we have just over 6,600 enrolled for June and just over 5,000 enrolled for July. So definitely those numbers are coming in with 616 of them being kindergartners. So you'll recall that was a heavy push and priority for us, was getting those kids back into our system, whether they were kindergarteners slated for this year or coming in, making sure that we recovered that earliest learner back to Explore. And so that is happening.
Nicole, can you repeat the June number?
Yes, the June number is 6613 is the exact, but just over 66.
Thank you.
So hiring update just for your knowledge, 961 for the Explore session total. So across both sessions, that's who we've hired today to support those learners that are coming. So just a little bit of update there. We will continue that, obviously, to get as many kids as we can exposed to our classrooms in the summer. Student vaccine clinics, you knew we talked last at the board meeting about opportunity to give students 16 or older the Pfizer vaccine. So 533 students were able to participate in that across all 5 high schools, and we'll be getting second doses in 3 weeks. So just updating you there with the opportunity we were able to provide to get access to the vaccine to our students.
Will there be another opportunity for students?
Dr. Range? Not as of yet. So the last piece, we talked already about requirement around state assessment testing and getting 95% completion rate. And so just wanted to update you on where we were. This is as of 2 p.m. today. Don't you love all my exact
Yes.
my people? They're so funny.
Yes, we
so
do.
exact as of 2 p.m. today when we think MAP, so think K-8, right? So 3 through 8 are testing. April 19th through May 7th, 64% complete as of right now. With that, and we have makeup already slated through May 27th for any kiddos that were ill or anybody that's been on quarantine. So we do have procedures in place to track that number to make sure that we can get them. So 46,247 completed sessions. So I'm throwing shout outs to our virtual teachers that are coming in to support, our regular seated teachers who are taking on this task, principals who are helping at organizing, our AAA department. I mean, all the people that I can say thank you to, I'm gonna say it in front of you because it takes a village and an army to get kids tested, especially in light of what we're kind of dealing with. So just wanted you to know about that. Obviously, the end of course testing window also opened on April 26th and is running through May 14th. We have 5,027 students that are registered. So not a high completion rate there because many of our teachers connect that to our course finals, and obviously those will be happening in the upcoming weeks. We will, as soon as that all closes, state assessment, test our students for our internal metric, which is our iReady assessment, and we will be doing 16,000 K through 8 students between the close of the MAP window and the end of the school year. So be thinking, please, about our kiddos as they're preparing and our teachers to show what they know on this round of assessment. So update there.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So it came to my attention that to incentivize, because the state is requiring the students that are not seated to also take it, and I guess there's some difficulty in making that happen. Is it correct that there was a 3%, I don't know if it's to a final or to a grade increase as an incentive to arrive and take the MAP testing on site?
I can't speak to that specifically. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, but I can tell you that we've tested 442 virtual elementary students already. So we're having really incredible turnout with relationship to that. We've only had 10 students refuse to be tested.
No, this is in regards to their older students.
I don't know what you're speaking to, so can you clarify for me the question?
Yes, so like an incentive sent out to algebra students or, whatever classes that you're not seated, but if you come in to take it as an incentive, we offer the launch students a 3% grade advantage.
I'd have to investigate that. I'm not aware of that.
Did you get back with the board on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I just have a few quick updates. So some of our strategic communication, we're working collaboratively with the system to provide support messaging to families on how to support their students during this window for MAP testing and end of course exams. So April 19th through May 14th, we'll be following up with that messaging with families. Again, transportation opt-in, opt-out closes this Friday, April 30th, so we will continue with that messaging. We've been working collaboratively on vaccination opportunities, making sure that our staff and those 16 plus students are all aware of those vaccination opportunities that are there. Continuing to follow up on Explore registration and kindergarten registration opportunities. We released today a video, our In Focus segment featuring Dr. Lathan, and Dr. Lathan is talking about how engaged she remains with our executive leadership team during this time of transition to prepare for a successful start on July 1st. So that video was shared with all of our parents today. It will be posted to social media tomorrow and will be featured in our e-newsletter later this week. And then finally, I just want to remind everyone that Hall of Fame deadline for nominations for SPS Hall of Fame will be this Friday, April 30th. So if you've not yet had a chance to consider someone to nominate for that, we encourage you to do so. Once the nomination window closes, we'll have a panel that's representative of the entire district come together, evaluate those nominations, and then make a selection of those individuals who will be honored in October.
Great, thank you, Stephen.
Good evening. So our equity champions will be receiving their last training for the school year, and then during that training, they'll be submitting their equity site summaries, which was a new addition that we added to their position. So in light of COVID, that way they can document kind of what their equity goals look like for the school year and the different initiatives that they'll be doing through the school year as well. So we look forward to reviewing that as a department, as it's a new initiative for the position.
Thank you. Anything new?
I would just once again encourage you to invite individuals to apply for positions in the district. We do have a handful of elementary, middle, and high school teaching positions, as well as custodial, nutrition services, transportation positions, paraprofessional positions that are open for next year. So please share the word, encourage individuals to apply. And I would also note, both Stephen and Nicole mentioned vaccinations, that we did get a report today that about 1,000 of our staff members participated in vaccinations at various locations that we were able to support through early release or giving a little bit of time away from work and able to return. So we appreciate those efforts, and that doesn't include those who went to walk up, no charge, just come and be vaccinated sorts of clinics. And so we're really encouraged by the response of our staff and appreciate the opportunity that you provide for staff to be released, to go become vaccinated, and then to return to work. So thank you for your support, your ongoing support of those efforts.
Thank you, Penny. Carol, any updates
Well,
that you haven't shared with us?
I covered it all. I do want to comment that today is National School Bus Driver Appreciation Day.
Yes.
So we should celebrate our bus drivers. We need them each and every day. Yes, absolutely. And I know you're aware there are 3 weeks left in the legislative session. That's where Dr. Jungman is this evening, and so he'll have more information to share with us during an upcoming meeting. Other than that, no update on legislative.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. We'll move on to legislative update, which we don't have one tonight because we are in the middle of that, and we appreciate Dr. Jungman being up there as our advocate. Our next agenda item is Board of Education discussion, board comments, and we'll take time for any of us to share any board comments. I'm going to start us out by, it was a busy week. It was a busy week this past week, or since the last time we've been together, and I just want to thank the foundation of the SPS Foundation, who I know several of us were able to attend the Teacher Appreciation Banquet, which was last Monday. It felt great to be in a safe room with our teachers and to be able to celebrate our teachers and staff. And so the foundation did a great job in recognizing our not only our Teachers of the Year, but also those that were receiving the various awards of incoming teachers. And so it was just great to be together and cheer on our teachers. Last Thursday night was the MSBA regional meeting at Logan Rogersville, and I know several of us were able to attend that together, and it was nice to, again, be with and hear a legislative update from MSBA before dinner, and then as well as get to hear and see some of our other fellow school board members from our local districts that we serve with. And again, that was the first event that we've had to even see some of our regional peers in over a year. And normally we have, greater interaction in a normal year. So just letting you all and the public know that we had that event going on. Our 3 new board members started their internal SPS orientation yesterday. Their next scheduled session is the week of May 10th. They are all 3 getting signed up. Kathy is helping getting them registered for their MSBA mandatory requirements, and they're selecting those dates, so just making all of us aware. And then a follow-up from our last board meeting where I asked Charles and Sharita to help me bring together in the next couple of months to bring back to you to talk about making our board and community engagement structure stronger. Charles and Sharita and I will be meeting the week of May 10th to start that conversation, and likely as we look ahead in the various discussions that may need to happen with our board, we may be looking at a retreat time in July with our new superintendent coming on board and setting a time, some discussions that will be of value that takes place outside of just the regular structured business meeting, and that would likely be a topic. So just reporting back to you on that with more information to come on that topic. This is also our time that we can respond to any public comments that we want to share, but also, I forgot, Charles, you are going to give us an update on the MSBA board meeting that you were just attending, and thank you so much for serving in that capacity.
You're welcome. It is, generally speaking, a pleasure, and it is always a privilege.
All the time. It's a lot of time. It is a lot of time to serve.
The MSBA board meeting was Friday and Saturday. It was virtual for some of us. Others were in Columbia for it. I think in the broadest, I mean, beyond the normal transaction of business that you've just got to do in that kind of setting, I think the best way to characterize sort of the theme was the challenges facing public education in Missouri, and they are numerous. There are numerous. There's no question. From the weakness of broadband infrastructure, almost a quarter of kids in Missouri lack access to broadband, and that's just not vital in the 21st century, simply to say. It is both a learning issue and an equity issue. We are making progress, and there's care money and all of that, and state funds are flowing in that direction, but we've got a long way to go. We have not peaked prematurely, I think would be a fair way to describe that. And obviously, not just in the pandemic year, but in the pre-pandemic year, and it's going to continue in the post-pandemic era too. The real value of school-based healthcare providers of various kinds, and there are a lot of the mental health options are particularly crucial. The reality that I think the pandemic made especially clear. It did occur to me that our collaboration with rural is particularly, again, for our community and our kids. But the benefits are not limited solely to our kids, although but also to our faculty and staff. And this is really crucial. You probably saw the News Leader article, MSU faculty members indicating that a lot of teachers feel that they've been harassed, disrespected, et cetera, and that was a thing that came up at the MSBA because we're accountable for that, and it's on us in a sense. And then the next big issue that we spent a lot of talking about was nurturing the next generation of teachers and through advocacy, right? And I think our initiatives with local universities and HBCUs and other minority serving institutions are a good step in this direction. So those are some of the ways in which being an innovator and being Missouri's largest district and we're innovative in those ways. There are probably some ways in which we can actually lead more effectively as we go forward. And then, quite candidly, those advocacy efforts are really important because the next challenge public schools face is, frankly, candor, what's going on in Jefferson City. It is probably the most the most dangerous year of the General Assembly with some of the legislation being debated. Hopefully, at best, we can run out the clock on this session and live to fight another day, whether they deal with educational saving accounts or with scholarship accounts they tend to be more nice ways of saying charters that will, quite frankly, siphon money away from public education. We can call them lots of things, right? We called lots of things here tonight. But in effect, they are frontal assaults on public education. And whatever else we might do here, we have to be accountable. And so I will send you more email alerts than you will want to get, and I would encourage you to reach out to our legislators, because public education, strong public education, is the cover charge for living in a civilized society. And we simply have to be willing to pay it, and we have to be willing to fight for it, and all of that. But interestingly enough, and I don't think I was hallucinating, but there was a sense in which some of the conversation earlier tonight sort of aligned with some of those issues. And I'll go a little bit off script here. I'll try to be brief. And when I sit at the board table, like all of you, I only try to channel sort of this kind of archetypal, semi-rational person whose primary concern is for kids. And I think we all do that, right? We do. And if that isn't sufficient for some folks, recall, goes out, so be it, right? That's the nature of it. We're all trying our dead level best to do what's right for kids. So that's what I do when I'm at the board table. Now, as an insomniac, probably in about 5 or 6 hours, I'm going to be sitting on my bed with a beverage of some kind. And I'm going to start channeling my 10-month-old grandson. Right? And that's really important to me because I'm sitting here today, right, at this board table as a middle-aged, maybe post-middle-aged, sadly, middle-aged, cisgender, middle-class white guy, okay? That is sort of the pinnacle of privilege. I've got all of that, and I can't not be those things. I would encourage all of us, however, to be much more reflective about that privilege and the responsibility for responding in meaningful ways to those who do not occupy that same spot. My grandson is, like I said, he's 10 months old. I'm not going to be on this board when he starts school in Springfield. But the decisions this board and subsequent boards will make will shape what that experience will be like for him. And with all due respect, if we don't get past all these straw arguments about suggesting that people like me are somehow vilified in this society, I mean, we're going to make no progress whatsoever. We can either allow ourselves to wallow in indecision about whether or not we can build the more humane and inclusive community that everybody deserves, or frankly, we can just get on with it and build that community because we do deserve it. The conversations about equity and inclusion and all the other, the stuff about CRT, it becomes sort of, it's the L word, the CRT, or fellow traveler, the communist, or whatever else it may be. Those are all straw arguments that try to keep us from having hard conversations. And those conversations are easy when they're easy, but they only matter when they're hard. And they are really, really hard. And frankly, and I'll shut up after this, the future of Springfield is going to be brighter. Now, frankly, the future of Springfield is only possible if we actually build that inclusive, humane community. And quite frankly, if we don't get on the right side of history on this one, we will, as a board, as a district, as a community, we will have failed. Hard stop. I'm done.
I'm glad this is recorded so I can go back and take notes because I appreciate your updates to the board on MSBA, and you do keep us briefed on what you're hearing and how we can advocate in sending messages, and I thank you for that. I also thank you for your voice. You have a way with words that can quickly articulate things, and I appreciate you sharing and being vulnerable with us at the board table, and I value your thoughts, Charles. Anybody else want to share some board comments?
I have comments, and I was not going to say anything after Charles. I probably shouldn't have said anything after Charles because you do have a way with words. But I did want to, and you kind of already touched on it. The last meeting, I made a comment during comment period about the no respond policy, and I made a statement that I felt that it was necessary for us to increase our engagement with the community, and you agreed, and we have plans to discuss that. I still think that the board meeting is not the right place to have those discussions. I appreciate actually all of the people who came to speak tonight, but it does hijack the meeting when we do have so many speakers. I do appreciate it, but I think that there are better ways for us to engage than this board meeting. And as you see at the very end, all of those people who had very strong feelings aren't here after they've hijacked the meeting. But I think there would be a better way to do that. And so I'm hoping that when we meet in May 10th, that will give us the opportunity to find better ways to engage with the community so that we can have dialogue, so we can have discussions, hopefully in a way that is meaningful, hopefully in a way that doesn't try to gaslight people like me as a person of color who has both lived systematic racism and who has, as a professional, research systematic racism. To gaslight me, to tell me it doesn't exist, is wholly problematic.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other board comments at this time before we move forward with our upcoming meetings? Okay, seeing none at this time. Just a reminder, I believe Kathy emailed us today that the Springfield Prayer Breakfast has been moved to virtual and sent us the link for anyone who wants to attend that. The OTC middle college graduation, which are just an incredible program and incredible students, is available for us to attend online to show support, and that is May 12th, and Kathy has sent us that email as a reminder. Our next board meeting is Tuesday, May 18th at 5:30. I believe you have a calendar invite for that. It's a combined meeting. May is a busy end of the school year, plus we have graduations that week, and just a reminder about that. Our Studi alternative school graduation is Wednesday, May 19th at 10 a.m. and Kathy has invited us, and anybody who wants to attend that can let Kathy know. Our commencement schedule for May 20th and May 21st, our board member assignments have been emailed to us, and Kathy is working to coordinate any regalia requests that you may need for those days. It's always a wonderful celebration time. Did I miss any dates? Anybody think of anything else? That's all I have noted on my list there. Our next agenda item is plus deltas. If you want to put any pluses or critiques on a Post-it and give that to Kathy as we head to executive session, then we always review those in our board officer meeting to look for continual improvement of our board meetings. The next agenda item is that we need to go and vote and go into executive session. The recommended action is that the board meets in executive session to discuss legal and collective bargaining matters as provided in section 610.021, subsections 1 and 9 of the revised statute of Missouri. Sharita will make the motion. Is there a second? Charles will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes. This now concludes the public portion of our meeting, so thank you for those who have stayed with us. And we can now power down our laptops or close it, and then we'll head to we'll head back to our executive session.